Chapter 304. This kid is a little annoying. Lu Qianni felt a little awkward. Who was he? Many people tried to get on his good side, and he'd taken the initiative to shake hands with Lin Yi. Now that he was being ignored, he felt a little embarrassed. But if Lin Yi really was as miraculous as Guan Shuimin said, then it was normal for a miracle doctor to put on airs. He was someone many people wanted to get on his good side. After all, it was normal that he didn't like him. Uncle, don't get tricked by him. I know this kid. He's not a miracle doctor. Chen Tian was getting angry at his uncle's respect for Lin Yi. He's Sun Jingyi's boyfriend. A liar. Chen Tian found it hard to connect the title of miracle doctor with Lin Yi. The kid didn't look like a miracle doctor at all, and he'd asked Sun Jingyi about what Lin Yi did for a living. Sun Jingyi tried her best to cover it up, but Chen Tian still got the gist of it. The kid didn't have a proper job and was unemployed. Otherwise, with Sun Jingyi's personality, there was no way she wouldn't brag about her boyfriend's good points. If Lin Yi really was a miracle doctor, Sun Jingyi would have used this to attack him already. Why would she hide it? This was why Chen Tian dared to make things difficult for Lin Yi. As far as he was concerned, Lin Yi was no miracle doctor. These people must have been tricked by Lin Yi. Lu Qianni, Huiru, and Guan Shuimin all looked at Lin Yi, surprised. Fine, I'm a liar. What no one expected was for Lin Yi to admit it. Since there are people who don't want to see me, then I'll take my leave. Grandpa Guan, I'll come visit again. With that, Lin Yi stood up and prepared to leave. What a joke. Lin Yi didn't owe the Lius anything. He only treated Elder Lu because of Guan Shuimin, and since they called him a liar, Lin Yi couldn't be bothered to explain himself. I'm too lazy to treat you if you call me a liar. Go look wherever you want. We'll meet again. Haze. Guan Shuimin sighed. He wasn't angry at Lin Yi's actions, but he didn't like Chen Tian's behavior. He didn't know what relationship this kid had with Lu Qianni. Why did he bring him here to embarrass himself? Great, now that you've pissed him off, he won't treat your old man anymore. What are you going to do now? In terms of age, Chen Tian was a few years older than Lin Yi, but in Shuimin's eyes, Chen Tian was just a kid. Lin Yi, on the other hand, was his old friend, his teacher. Lin Yi walked towards the entrance of the villa without any hesitation. Guan Shuimin didn't stop him. Lu Qianni was stunned for a moment, but then he panicked. They had finally found Lin Yi. How could they let him go just like that? Lu Qianni couldn't care less about his identity. He stepped forward and grabbed Lin Yi. Little magic doctor, please wait. Why should I stay? Lin Yi pursed his lips. What if someone calls me a liar? Pa. Lu Qianni slapped Huiru's face. He may be Chen Tian's uncle, but Chen Tian was still a member of House Wu and a rising star of the younger generation at that. He couldn't discipline him directly, so he vented his anger on his wife, who was also a Wu. It was natural for a man to discipline his wife. Even if the Wu family knew about it, they wouldn't say anything. After Wu Huiru married into the Lu family, she would be a member of the Lu family. Look at your nephew. What did you do? What did you do? Tianni roared, frustrated. You're the perfect example of a loving aunt ruining her nephew. Huiru was stunned by Tianni's sudden slap, but she realized that she shouldn't have brought Chen Tian with her. When she regained her composure, she'd pissed off the little miracle doctor. And if the brothers of House Lu found out about it, they'd all divorce her as their sister-in-law. Pa. Huiru slapped Chen Tian's face. What nonsense are you talking about? If you keep this up, I'll call my brother and tell you to go home. Chen Tian didn't dare say anything after being slapped by his aunt. There were many rules in a big family, and it was natural for the elders to discipline the younger ones. Chen Tian lowered his head and focused all his hatred on Lin Yi. As far as he was concerned, all of this was because of Lin Yi. Little magic doctor. You see, Lu Qianni had already made his stance as he looked at Lin Yi with pleading eyes. Yes, pleading. Curing his father's illness was his biggest wish. Oh, this kid's a bit annoying. I don't want to see him anymore. Lin Yi glanced at Chintian. Huiru, why aren't you taking Chintian out? Lu Qianni glared at Huiru. Why was she so insensible? You can see that the little magic doctor hates your nephew. Why don't you make him disappear from the doctor's sight? Oh, okay. Huiru pushed Chintian. Tian, let's go out first. Chintian humphed, unsatisfied. He looked at Lin Yi viciously and mouthed, just you wait, before leaving the villa with Huiru. Lin Yi didn't even look at Chintian. Who cared what he said? There were many people who wanted to humiliate him, but none of them got what they wanted. Of course, that was unless his old man could torture him to the point where he couldn't do anything about it. Little divine doctor, that disappointing kid has already been driven out by me. Can you treat my father now? Lu Qianni asked carefully as he looked at Lin Yi. Did I say I'm going to treat your father? Lin Yi looked at Lu Qianni. Was there something wrong with this guy's head? When did he say he was going to treat his father? That's... Qianni's face froze as he groaned inwardly. Indeed, Lin Yi never promised to treat his father. He only said he hated Chintian. Little magic doctor, can you please take a look at my father? Previously, if my nephew had offended you, I apologize on his behalf. It wasn't easy to make Lu Qianni humble himself like this, but he really did put all his hopes on Lin Yi. After seeing Lin Yi's miraculous skills with his own eyes, plus Xuemin's respect for Lin Yi, Lu Qianni didn't doubt that Lin Yi was the real deal. If it were anyone else, even a miracle doctor, Lu Qianni wouldn't act like this. But Lu Qianni didn't dare underestimate this young man, who was called a specialist by Guan Xuemin and Miracle Dr. Guan, especially with Lin Yi's temper. It was normal for powerful people to have a temper, and Lu Qianni understood that. He was sure that Lin Yi was a master. Chapter 305. A rip-off the crowd went into an uproar at Lin Yi's words. Even Guan Xuemin was staring at Lin Yi in shock. Elder Lu could live for another 8 to 10 years if he could keep his condition under control, but that was under the condition that the angina wouldn't act up again. An old man at Jinhu's age would be at the end of his rope after another 8 to 10 years. Even Hua Tuo himself wouldn't be able to change his fate. And this, how could it be said that even if he was cured, it would all be for naught? Sickness and death were part and parcel of human nature. It was normal for descendants to die 8 to 10 years later. Ha ha, young man, you're right. In another 8 to 10 years, I'll be buried. That's only natural. However, if you can let this old man not be tormented by illness in these few years, this old man will be eternally grateful. Xinhu was no longer afraid of death at his age, and Lin Yi wasn't wrong. Most importantly, Xinhu knew very well that this daughter-in-law of his had offended Lin Yi from the start, and her nephew had offended Lin Yi as well. Would he still be able to treat him? Treat? For your sake, I'll reluctantly do it, but there'll be a fee. The only person Lin Yi had a good impression of was Elder Lu. No matter what, the old man knew how to repay kindness. He'd even invited Lin Yi to Yanjing a while back, so Lin Yi had a good impression of him. Still, Lin Yi wasn't in a good mood if he agreed to treat just like that, so he came up with a compromise. A fee? Not a problem. Lu Qianni nodded quickly after hearing Lin Yi's terms. It was only right and proper to pay for treatment, so Lu Qianni had no objections. Excuse me, young miracle doctor, how much does it cost? 10 million a year. Lin Yi said, it takes a year to cure, but 10 million, all right, no problem. Lu Qianni hesitated for a moment, but he still nodded. Although 10 million was not a small number, it was nothing compared to his father's health. Are you sick? Lin Yi frowned after listening to Lu Qianni's words. I said 10 million a year, not a total of 10 million. Lu Qianni was stunned, and his heart was burning with anger. He also guessed that Lin Yi might be taking advantage of his misfortune, but there was nothing he could do. He had directly offended Lin Yi, and it was almost impossible to make Lin Yi relent. He didn't dare to show his dissatisfaction, because if he did, Lin Yi might not treat him even if he offered money. Then, how much does it cost? Didn't I just say it? He can still live for 8 to 10 years. Don't you know how to calculate it yourself? Lin Yi looked at Lu Qianni with disdain. Then, isn't that 80 million? Lu Qianni was shocked. This was really a large number. 80 million? Lin Yi couldn't help but be amused. Well, if you want your old man to suddenly get sick after 8 years, then 80 million. Anyway, if he doesn't die after 8 years, he will definitely die when the disease breaks out. Lu Qianni couldn't help but smile bitterly after listening to Lin Yi's words. Lin Yi seems to want 100 million from me. If it's 100 million, then it's better to say it clearly. It seems that I am reluctant to spend money on my father. He can't guarantee that his father can only live for 8 years. According to what Lin Yi said, 80 million is only for 8 years. If he suddenly dies after 8 years, then he is not a filial son. Guan Shuimin also understood at this moment, and his expression was a little strange. He just told Lin Yi that there is no startup capital, and now the startup capital is here? Lin Yi really extorted a lot of money, although Guan Shuimin knew that Lin Yi was just using this as a pretext to make a fuss, who asked the Lu family to offend Lin Yi. Guan Shuimin didn't say anything. In this situation, it was not appropriate for him to interrupt. Elder Guan, you see, Lu Qianni was a little helpless. If it was 10 million, he could take it out immediately, but if it was 100 million, he also had to plan. Isn't it a little too much? Therefore, he wanted Guan Shuimin to help him. Mr. Lu, you really overestimate me. Guan Shuimin shook his head. My relationship with Lin Yi can only be regarded as a teacher and a friend. I can't interfere with him or anything. A teacher and a friend? That's half a teacher if you ask. Tianni paused a little helplessly. I'll be honest with you. House Lu is a big house, but it'd be hard for us to take out 100 million in cash. What would you ask your teacher to do? Guan Shuimin smiled bitterly. Lu Qianni was stunned, not understanding what Guan Shuimin was saying. Lil Yi is half a teacher to me. Guan Shuimin didn't feel embarrassed at all. Shuimin didn't feel embarrassed at all. He was a man of honor, and he respected Lin Yi's medical skills. He wouldn't hide anything just because he was afraid of losing face. What? Lu Qianni was shocked and looked at Lin Yi in disbelief. Guan Shuimin actually said that Lin Yi is his teacher? How is that possible? However, Lu Qianni was a person who had seen the world, and he immediately understood. Yes, even Guan Shuimin couldn't do anything about his father's illness. So how could his student do anything? The only possibility was that Lin Yi was better than Guan Shuimin. That's all I have to say. Guan Shuimin waved his hand. I've already introduced Lil B to you, and it's up to you whether you want to treat him or not. But don't worry, even if you don't take out the 100 million, I will still do my best. If possible, I will ask Lil E for help. 100 million. Okay, no problem. Having figured out the relationship between Lin Yi and Guan Shuimin, Lu Qianni agreed without hesitation. Although it was difficult for the Lu family to take out 100 million in cash, they could sell off some of their stocks and real estate to get the amount. As the core figure of the Lu family, his father couldn't be harmed. As long as his father was healthy and alive, the Lu family had hope. All right, call me when you have the money ready. Lin Yi nodded and got straight to the point. You can find me if you want to talk to Grandpa Guan. I'll be going now. It's getting late. All right, Miracle Dr. Lin, do you need me to send you off? Lu Qianni had already thrown caution to the wind. It was only 100 million, right? Compared to his father's health, it really wasn't much. House Lu was different from other rising houses, and the reason why they were doing so well was because of Lu Junhu's connections and reputation. Lu Qianni wanted to send Lin Yi off because he wanted to know where Lin Yi lived. He wasn't worried about the 100 million anymore. He was worried that Lin Yi would go back on his word. Chapter 306. Parting on bad terms, all right. Xuemin nodded. Be careful on the road. You've been drinking, so if you're driving, I've been awake for a while now. Do I look drunk to you, Grandpa Guan? Lin Yi smiled. Drinking? Lin Yi rarely got drunk. Ever since he started practicing the art of dragon mastery, Lin Yi's tolerance for alcohol had increased as well. The old man at home often dragged Lin Yi to drink with him, but it was always old Lin, who was completely drunk after the drinks, while Lin Yi was completely fine. Old Lin was quite annoyed by this. Drinking with someone who couldn't get drunk wasn't fun at all. In the end, old Lin stopped allowing Lin Yi to drink, telling him to drink plain water instead. The reason was simple. He thought Lin Yi was wasting alcohol, and since drinking was the same as drinking water, he might as well drink water instead. Xuemin nodded. Lin Yi didn't look drunk at all. What he'd done to House Lu just now was enough to make them lose their temper. After Lin Yi left, Lu Qianni let out a long sigh and smiled bitterly at Xuemin. Elder Guan, I'm sorry for all the trouble I've caused. After all, Lu Qianni had come to Xuemin for treatment. Now that he'd switched to Lin Yi, it was a little disrespectful. While Lin Yi had been introduced by Xuemin, Lu Qianni still had to explain himself. He'd been too polite to Lin Yi earlier, and he was worried that Xuemin might have some ulterior motives. Lin Yi was a miracle doctor, but so was Xuemin. Lu Qianni didn't want to offend him. Xuemin waved his hand. I don't have the ability, but I hope my patient can get better. Did you guys know Lin Yi before? He's the one who saved my father's life I told you about last time. Lu Qianni explained. So, this is why I believe that he can cure my father's illness. All right, heaven wings. Shinhu spoke up at this time. When you raise money, give Professor Guan an extra 2 million. Okay, Dad. Lu Qianni quickly nodded. Forget about my consultation fee. I didn't cure your illness. Guan Xuemin waved his hand and was about to refuse. No matter what, you've helped me for so many days. You should give me the money, Shinhu said. In his eyes, Xuemin's referral fee was acceptable. All right then, I'll accept it. Xuemin thought about it. He'd just gotten 100 million from Lin Yi, but he'd open a company and might need more money. 2 million was good enough, and so he accepted the money. After a few more words, Lu Qianni stood up and left. It was getting late, and Xuemin seemed to have drunk quite a bit. He didn't want to disturb his rest. On the way back, Huiru heard that Lin Yi had asked for 100 million. She was shocked. House Wu was a powerful house, but they were still one of those hidden houses that specialized in ancient martial arts. They didn't have many industries, and 100 million was enough to last them for a few years. Uncle, that Lin Yi is a liar. He's Sun Jingyi's boyfriend. How could he be a miracle doctor? Don't let him trick you. Chen Tian was pissed off at Lin Yi's demand. If he let Lin Yi get 100 million, how was he going to compete with Lin Yi? Sun Jingyi wouldn't even look at him in the eye when the time came. And the funny thing was that this was all caused by his uncle's family. Wu Chintian, what are you talking about? What do you know? Shut up. Lu Qianni was angry at his nephew for being so immature. Don't you think you've caused enough trouble? You've already offended Miracle Dr. Lin. Do you want to kill your grandpa, Lu? Humph. Uncle, I'm doing this for your own good. If you don't want to listen, then forget it. I won't bother you anymore. Qin Tian's stubborn young master's temper flared up. He was the most promising of the younger generation in House Wu, the one who had the highest chance of reaching Mystic in Iron Fist arts, so he was respected everywhere in the house. He had never been humiliated like this before. Tian, don't be rash. Apologize to your uncle. Huiru was panicking and quickly pulled Qin Tian's hand. Apologize? Humph. Qin Tian smiled coldly. And since Uncle looks down on House Wu, then forget it. Do you want to come back with me or stay here? Tian, stop it. Huiru didn't expect Qin Tian to be this angry. All right, And since you're already a part of House Lu, I won't force you. Chen Tian's eyes flashed with determination. Stop the car. I'm getting off. Lu Qianni naturally wouldn't let Chen Tian do as he pleased. He stopped the car by the roadside and smiled coldly. Since this Wu kid didn't know what was good for him, then he shouldn't blame him for being ruthless. Other things were fine, but his father's illness was involved. He wouldn't be nice to Chen Tian. House Wu. Humph. Even if he was from House Wu, he was just a junior. How dare he be so arrogant in front of him? Lu Qianni was furious. Huiru, you're going back with him? I won't be messing around with Tian anymore. Huiru sighed helplessly. She knew that from today onwards there would be a rift between House Wu and House Lu. But now that she was a daughter-in-law of House Lu, she had to stand on House Lu's side. This was the foundation of being a wife. She'd be laughed at if she messed around with House Wu. She wanted to mediate, but she didn't know how. It was normal for Chen Tian to be angry, but Lin Yi was Sun Jingyi's boyfriend. That alone was enough for Chen Tian to not be nice to him. But Lin Yi was someone who could save his father-in-law, and this wasn't going to be easy to mediate. Huiru, go and send him off. He's your nephew, after all. Jinhu, who hadn't spoken until now, spoke up. He didn't want to say anything about House Wu's business. As the head of House Lu, he couldn't interfere with House Wu's business. What happened to House Wu's nephew would be handled by House Wu, and it wasn't up to others to say anything. Yes, Dad. Huira nodded and sent Chen Tian off the car. She whispered after 2 steps, Tian, don't do anything rash. That Lin Yi's really good at medicine. Aunt, you're helping him too? Chen Tian humphed unhappily. If you want to deal with him, at least wait until he heals my father-in-law's illness, to be honest. I'm really pissed off that he's asking for so much. If you can get that 100 million back for me, I'm sure Uncle would be happy to see it too, Huiru said softly. Chapter 307. Peng Zhan's dilemma. Huiru, on the other hand, was a very selfish woman. As far as she was concerned, letting a little-known doctor like Lin Yi treat her illness was already giving him a lot of face. If he were to really be cured, wouldn't there be countless rich people coming to him for treatment? Once he was promoted to the upper class, how much money would he have then? Asking for 100 million right now was practically extortion. Since when had House Lu ever been taken advantage of like this? Even if he was a miracle doctor, a few million would be the most he'd get. Humph, fine then. Since you dare ask for it, you'd have to be able to keep it first. Of course, Tianni would have exploded if he'd known how selfish and short-sighted his wife was. 100 million wasn't a small amount, but it was worth it to gain the friendship of a miracle doctor. Just like that, it was worth it. Wouldn't there be a day when you'd get old and sick? Would you still be begging Linny then? What a wastrel with water in her head. But evidently, Lu Qianni didn't know that yet, and it was too late for him to stop Chen Tian from going against Lin Yi. Peng Zhan was very pissed today. Gubang was calling for a board meeting to elect a new chairman. Peng Zhan's heart turned cold at the thought of Gubang and Guanghua's relationship yesterday. It was the first time he'd felt so powerless. He couldn't control the situation anymore. Peng Zhan was still full of confidence before the board meeting yesterday, confident that he'd be able to get rid of the parasite in the company, slowly weakening Gubang's power and eventually kicking him out of the company. But now, things weren't what he'd expected. The second and third largest shareholders of the company had formed an alliance, and their shares had already exceeded his. He wouldn't be able to handle them if they were to make things difficult for him in the board meeting. Since when had the company become like this? The company his father founded was in his hands, and he was going to hand it over to someone else? Peng Zhan hadn't told his father about the company all this time. He didn't want the company to disturb him now that his father had retired. Besides, the company wasn't a big deal to Peng Zhan. As long as he held on to the shares, he was confident that he'd be able to deal with some of the shareholders who were a little greedy and selfish. But Peng Zhan hadn't expected the shareholders to unite. He was at his wit's end. Gubong had already gone to contact the other board members with Guanghua, and there was no chance of reconciliation at all. Perhaps he wouldn't be the chairman of the company anymore in a few days. Left with no other choice, Peng Zhan dialed up his father's number. He didn't want to disturb his father, but he had no choice but to tell Elder Chu about the company's situation at this critical juncture. Elder Chu listened to Peng Zhan's words quietly, not interrupting him. He waited for him to finish, remaining silent for a while. "Dad, look." Peng Zhan felt exhausted. A third of the board had been roped in by Gubong, and even he, the chairman, couldn't stop this. Since Gubong was calling for this meeting, it meant that he had the confidence to replace him as the chairman. "Actually, I have long seen the problem with the company's board of directors." Elder Chu's voice was calm. "Peng Zhan, you're too kind and kind-hearted. That's a good point. But you have to understand that the business world is like a battlefield. Being kind to your enemy is being cruel to yourself. Everyone has greed and selfishness, and it's only natural that the board of directors would ally together to usurp power." "Then you mean—" Peng Zhan paused. His father didn't seem to want to get involved in this anymore. "Go find Lin Yi." Elder Chu sighed softly. "Perhaps he's the only one who can help you in this situation." "Him?" Peng Zhan was surprised. "Dad, you're asking him to come. Don't you mean for him? And Yao, he might have a way." Elder Chu didn't say it out loud, only smiling. "I understand, Dad." Peng Zhan hung up the phone. He didn't know why his father wanted him to go find Lin Yi, but he couldn't understand what Lin Yi could do in a situation like this. Lin Yi wasn't a shareholder of the company, and he didn't have any shares in his hands. Lin Yi wouldn't be able to interfere with the company's board of directors meeting, but since Elder Chu had asked him to look for Lin Yi, Peng Zhan could only give it a try. Peng Zhan really didn't expect that a business tycoon like him would fall into the trap of his father's old friend's son. Had he really been too kind? Perhaps his father was right if he'd acted decisively when he'd first discovered the problem. Perhaps this wouldn't have happened today. Some of the shareholders would have criticized him for not caring about his father's feelings, but it was still better than being at his wits' end. After some hesitation, Peng Zhan turned to Li Fu. "Go to Yao Yao's villa." "Yes, Mr. Chu." Falbert sighed. "Mr. Chu, don't be too hasty. If Elder Chu said that Lin Yi has a way, then he should have a way." "I hope so." Peng Zhan nodded. Lin Yi parked the car in front of Mignyao's villa and saw a Bentley turn in behind him. It was Falbert's car. Lin Yi got out of the car but didn't enter the villa. He waited for Falbert's car to park, and Peng Zhan got out of the car. Peng Zhan didn't expect Lin Yi to just come back. He looked at the van Lin Yi drove, surprised. "Your car?" "Oh, I helped Ling Shan catch a fugitive. That Heibao." Lin Yi didn't hide the truth. "It's Heibao's. I got the license plate from Ling Shan this afternoon." Peng Zhan nodded. He didn't expect Lin Yi to have built up his own network in Songshan without anyone noticing. The fact that he was able to get the car from Ling Shan meant that the two had a close relationship. "Uncle Chu has something to discuss with you," Peng Zhan said with a pat on Lin Yi's shoulder. He didn't want to waste time on the car. "Oh, all right, let's talk inside?" Lin Yi said as he locked the door. Peng Zhan hesitated. "Why don't you get in my car?" Lin Yi paused but understood immediately. He nodded. "Okay." Chapter 308. Leave it to Melon. Yi followed Peng Zhan into the Bentley, who lit up a cigarette and handed one to Lin Yi. Lin Yi waved his hand. "I'm not addicted. I don't like smoking." Peng Zhan didn't mind as he passed it to Falbert casually. "Uncle Chu's in some trouble." Peng Zhan didn't know why his old man wanted him to go look for Lin Yi, but he couldn't understand why Lin Yi would care about company matters other than protecting Meng Yao. Lin Yi didn't have any experience in this, did he? It's about the company, isn't it? Lin Yi didn't wait for Peng Zhan to finish, guessing that the only thing Peng Zhan was worried about right now was the company's business. "Yes, It's about the company. Peng Zhan nodded, not hiding anything. He wasn't going to hide anything, since he was looking for help. The second and third largest shareholders of the company have teamed up, and all the board members who are on good terms with them are on their side. They're planning to hold a board meeting to elect a new chairman. Peng Zhan nodded, not hiding anything. Lin Yi waved his hand. Uncle Chu, you don't have to go into the details. I don't know much about company operations, but there's one thing I want to know right now. Will these two be a threat to your position in the company? Yes, they've been in the company for years, and they have a certain amount of connections. Some of the board members are on good terms with them, and I'd lose for sure if they teamed up. Peng Zhan said. Lin Yi nodded, furrowing his eyebrows as he fell into deep thought. Peng Zhan didn't disturb Lin Yi, since he'd never come into contact with company matters before. He'd need some time to digest what he'd just heard. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi asked a strange question all of a sudden. The second and third largest shareholders you mentioned, what's their relationship like before? Before? Peng Zhan paused, a little angry. From what I've seen before, their relationship wasn't that good. You know, that the three major shareholders of the company, myself included, have a certain amount of power in the board of directors. There's no such thing as someone fawning over someone else. So, from what I've seen, their relationship has always been tense. But I don't know why, but at the board meeting on Sunday, the two of them actually teamed up. This is what caught me off guard. It turns out that the two of them have been colluding with each other. Heh. Lin Yi laughed. Uncle Chu, you're too involved. The person involved can't see clearly? Peng Zhan paused. Maybe they didn't collude with each other long ago, but only temporarily? Lin Yi shrugged and continued. Of course, this is just my guess. There's definitely something fishy going on. I think there's definitely a secret that no one knows about. Peng Zhan nodded. You're right, Yi, but it doesn't matter when they started working together. What's more important is, how do I deal with them working together? Huh? Why deal with them? Lin Yi smiled. Uncle Chu, haven't you thought about splitting them up, making them fight amongst themselves, or even inciting them to betray you? Lin Yi hadn't run a company before, but the most common way to deal with his enemies was to divide and destroy them, or to incite internal strife and let them kill each other first. Of course, instigating defection was also a good way. Oh, Peng Zhan paused. He'd been thinking about how to deal with Jin Gubang and Xie Guangbu's team. He'd never thought about splitting them up, inciting them to betray him, or inciting them to fight amongst themselves. Tell me about these two shareholders. Who's the leader? Lin Yi asked. Jin Gubang and Xie Guangbu are the two major shareholders. Jin Gubang's the one I've been trying to deal with. He's the reason why Yao Yao was attacked a couple of times. I was actually planning on using the theme park incident to cause trouble for Jin Gubang during the board meeting on Sunday, but Xie Guangbu jumped out of nowhere. With that, Peng Zhan explained the situation to Lin Yi. Old Xie doesn't speak or speak much, nor does he fight for power. Who knew that he'd be working with Jin Gubang this time? Peng Zhan's introduction, Lin Yi had a better understanding of the two shareholders of the company. This Jin Gubang was the leader this time, and getting him to defect was basically impossible. This Xie Guangbu that Peng Zhan was talking about was the key to solving this problem. Just as Peng Zhan had said, Xie Guangbu's behavior was completely different from his usual self on Sunday. There had to be something fishy going on. So Lin Yi decided to start with this person. All right, if that's the case, leave this to me, Uncle Chu. I'll take care of it. Lin Yi nodded. Where does Xie Guangbu live? Xie Guangbu. Yi, you're not planning on killing people and robbing them, are you? Peng Zhan paused as he looked at Lin Yi worriedly. Don't worry, I won't kill Xie Guangbu. Lin Yi gave Peng Zhan a reassuring smile. Killing him is the only way to solve the problem once and for all, but according to what you said earlier, I'd rather kill Jin Gubang than Xie Guangbu. Since I've set my sights on Xie Guangbu, I can't do something like that. Naturally, It wasn't that Lin Yi hadn't thought of killing Jean Gubong, but he didn't want to bring unnecessary trouble to Pengzhan. Jean Gubong, no matter what, he was still the second largest shareholder of Pengzhan Industries. The death of a small fry wouldn't be a big deal, but the death of a shareholder would definitely attract attention. Lin Yi still wanted to live a peaceful life in Songshan, so he didn't want to cause any trouble for now. That's good. Pengzhan nodded. Xie Guanghua's house is in the Qianhua waterfront district in the private villa area F. The 6th villa is his house. I understand. Leave it to me, Lin Yi said. I'll go talk to him now. Be careful. Pengzhan didn't know if he was doing the right thing by asking Lin Yi for help, but since the old man had said so, Pengzhan had to give it a try. Xie Guanghua isn't a normal person either. He has a bodyguard of his own, a master. Also, Lin Yi narrowed his eyes as he looked at Faubert involuntarily. Lin Yi had mentioned a golden class master before, and Faubert's expression had been a little different back then. Could it be that his suspicions were correct? That Faubert was a master amongst masters. Chapter 309. Chapter 309. How did you get in? Lin Yi thought that it was quite possible. If Faubert really was Pengzhan's bodyguard, then he had to be a physical practitioner, just like Wu Qintian. While he was a practitioner, he didn't have any qi in his body because he trained in physical arts. Lin Yi wouldn't be able to sense the qi in his body, nor would he be able to tell what level he was at. As a result, Faubert was a little mysterious in Lin Yi's eyes. Being able to stay by Pengzhan's side for so many years meant that a kid like Wu Qintian couldn't be compared to Faubert. Just how strong was he? Lin Yi didn't think that Faubert wasn't only responsible for Pengzhan's safety, but he also had to take care of Meng Yao and Yushu's safety when they went to school. Lin Yi didn't know if anyone had tried to harm Meng Yao or not, but judging from the fact that Meng Yao and Yushu were still alive, Faubert had to be pretty strong. Li Fu seemed to have sensed Lin Yi's gaze on his back. After a moment of silence, he spoke up. You're right, I'm Mr. Chu's guard. There's a master beside Mr. Xie, who's no weaker than me, but I'm a physical practitioner now, and he's a spiritual practitioner. Now, Lin Yi's interest was piqued by Faubert's words. What did this now mean? He used to practice the inner qi method, but why didn't he feel anything at all? I'll be careful. Lin Yi didn't really mind. A master. Huh? He was a master himself. With that, Lin Yi got out of the car and prepared to drive his van to Guanghua. There was no reason for Lin Yi to wait now that he knew what the problem was. Wait, Yi. Your van isn't going to be discovered, is it? Pengzhan asked as he looked at Lin Yi's van. Uncle Chu, what do you think I'm going to do? Lin Yi used the key to open the car door and prepared to get in. I'm going to talk to Xie Guanghua face to face. I'm not afraid of him recognizing me. I see. Pengzhan nodded. Why don't you drive Yao Yao's car? The people living in that district are all rich. Your car might be stopped at the entrance of the district. Okay, then I will drive Little Shoe's beetle. Since I have the key, I don't need to bother Yao Yao anymore. Lin Yi nodded, locked his broken van, and went to the garage to get the car. Qianhua Waterfront District was one of the most luxurious districts in Songshan. This place was known as the symbol of Songshan's nobility. Every household here had a duplex layout, and there were even independent villas. Basically, every household had a starting price of 10 million, and a villa could be sold for more than 30 million. The people who could live here were either wealthy or respectable, and this Lead River Shore was known as Songshan's wealthy district. Although not all rich people lived here, those who lived here were definitely rich people. Pengzhan didn't buy a house here because his current place was even more luxurious than this. As the third largest shareholder of Pengzhan Industries, one of the top 500 companies in the country, it wasn't surprising that Guanghua had a villa here. Besides, this Lead River Shore project was developed by Pengjian Industries. The management of Lead River Shore was very strict. Cars from outside were stopped at the entrance of the district. Only cars with a high enough grade would be let through, or cars with the district pass would be let through after it was confirmed that they were residents of the district. Lin Yi's Beetle wasn't too expensive, but people who could afford it usually didn't have the first car in their family. Lin Yi's Beetle was easily let through by the security guards. He didn't ask around for directions either, and drove around the area until he found Area F. It was actually quite easy to find the area, with all the bungalows and villas in the area. Lin Yi parked the car in front of the 6th villa and got out of the car. However, Lin Yi didn't press the doorbell. Instead, he stepped on the transformer box beside the villa and jumped up to the balcony on the 2nd floor. Although Guangbo lived in a luxurious villa, he wasn't a person who liked luxury. He lived here because of his identity as a shareholder. Sometimes he couldn't afford to lose face. If he lived in a shabby place, his business partners would be worried about his capabilities. Guangbo didn't remarry after losing his wife in his middle age. He didn't have much desire for material things, and he wasn't interested in women either. So after his wife passed away, he didn't bring any random women back to live with him. Guangbo's biggest wish was that his son could take over his career and make a name for himself. However, he didn't expect that his son would get addicted to gambling and drugs. He sent his son overseas to study with good intentions so that he could come back and help him. Gambling wasn't a big deal. A little gambling was fun, and Guangbo would occasionally play a few rounds with his old friends. But drugs, that was a bottomless pit. No matter how much money one had, it would be sucked into it. This time, his son actually owed a foreign mafia 100 million. Although Guangbo was furious, he only had one son, and he couldn't just ignore it. Guangbo had just ended the call with his son. Seeing his son beaten up badly, Guangbo's heart ached. He wanted to rush to his son's side and save him. Guangbo. A voice sounded in front of Xia Guangbo. Xia Guangbo was startled. He subconsciously raised his head and saw a shocking scene. Who are you? Guangbo looked like he saw a ghost as he looked at Lin Yi in disbelief. He had ended the call with his son and was in a daze for a while. Then there was another person in the room. The reason why Guangbo was surprised wasn't that Lin Yi had snuck into his room without a sound, but that Lin Yi had gotten in. When he was on the phone with his son, Guangbo purposely locked the door from the inside to prevent the housekeeper and bodyguards from hearing what he said. The room key was in his hands, so how did this person get in? More importantly, how did he get in? There were nannies and bodyguards downstairs, and it was impossible for him to enter without alerting them. If it was a normal visit, the nannies would have notified him. And if it was an abnormal intrusion, the bodyguards would have stopped him. But this person came in and stood in front of him, and he didn't even notice. Chapter 3:10. The bodyguard appears. Lin Yi pointed at the open window, not answering Guangbo's question. Can I ask you something? Why did you support Jean Gubong in the board meeting? Guangbo paused, understanding where Lin Yi was coming from. Pengjian sent you? Humph, you can leave now. Go back and tell him that there's no room for discussion. You've been eating too many stupid pills, haven't you? Why would he send me here? I'm helping out of my own volition. Lin Yi curled his lips. Did this guy think he was some small fry? Asking him to pass on the message? Was he stupid? Pengjian treated him pretty well, but Lin Yi had come to Songshan only because of his old man. Other than old Lin and his assassin master, there was no one else who could send Lin Yi to do anything. Then what do you do? Guangbo was a little surprised at Lin Yi's words. This guy didn't seem to be Pengjian's follower at all. What did he do then? Lin Yi frowned impatiently. I'm Meng Yao's bodyguard. Guangbo was taken aback. Meng Yao's bodyguard was here for him? Wasn't he being a busybody? You're Meng Yao's bodyguard. What are you doing here instead of protecting her? You don't believe me when I say you're retarded. Lin Yi glared at him like he was an idiot. Peng Zhan's Mingyao's dad. Who's going to pay for my expenses if he loses his job? Lin Yi was just saying that to draw a line between him and Peng Zhan. Peng Zhan could push all the blame away if things got exposed. If word got out that Peng Zhan threatened the shareholders, it wouldn't be good for his reputation. Guangbo was speechless. Were you the retarded one, or was I? Why was a bodyguard like you meddling in company business? Guangbo realized something all of a sudden. You're here for money, aren't you? Tell me, how much? It was no wonder that Guangbo thought of Lin Yi as a money grubber. Lin Yi's identity had nothing to do with the company's business. I say, why are you talking so much nonsense? Do you want to die? Lin Yi kicked the safe beside him, sending it flying. It landed in front of Guangbo with a bang, just 1 centimeter away from his toes. Guangbo was completely caught off guard. Cold sweat dripped down from his forehead. Was he still human? Was he really a bodyguard? How could he be so awesome? He could send a safe that weighed a few hundred pounds flying with just 1 kick? When he looked at the safe, Guangbo felt a chill down his spine. On the side of the safe, there was a big hole. He was kicked out by Lin Yi. This kind of vault safe was surrounded by thick iron plates. How could he kick a hole through it? It was already difficult for the thief to cut it open with a chainsaw. So how could he kick it? Of course, this was not the main problem. The main problem was that if the safe had flown any higher or further, he would have lost his life. I want you to stay away from Jin Gubang. Do you understand? Lin Yi didn't bother asking why the guy was helping Jin Gubang. As long as he was afraid of death, he'd better get as far away from Gubang as possible. Guangbo's face paled, but he didn't say anything. He couldn't answer Lin Yi. What would happen to his son if he stayed away from Jin Gubang? Guangbo was scared, but he couldn't lower his head. Tell me, how much money do I have to pay for you to let me go? Money? You think you're rich? Lin Yi said disdainfully as he walked over. Guangbo shrunk back subconsciously. Lin Yi, however, didn't do anything to Guangbo. He walked over to the safe that was dented by the kick and pulled hard. The door was pulled down by Lin Yi. Is there any money in this safe? Lin Yi flipped through the contents of the safe and found a bank book. He opened it, but Lin Yi was disappointed. There was a lot of money in the bank book, 40 million, but it had all been withdrawn a few days ago. There's only a few kwai left in your bank book. How are you going to give me money? Guangbo remembered that he'd transferred all his savings to his son a couple of days ago. Where would he have the money to give to Lin Yi? TSK, looks like you're in need of money? Is that why you agreed to Jin Gubang's request? Lin Yi tossed the bank book aside and continued flipping through the contents of the safe. He smiled when he took out a stack of documents. Peng Zhan Industries shares? All right, you can transfer them to me now. No. Guangbo abruptly sat up straight, a determined look on his face. That's impossible. Huh? Is that so? Lin Yi tossed the shares to the side. Do you want your life or the shares? However, at that moment, the door was kicked open and a man rushed in. As soon as the man rushed in, he shouted, Mr. Xia, are you all right? As soon as he asked the question, he saw Lin Yi and tensed up. He'd heard the loud noise coming from Guangbo's room and felt that something was wrong. He'd rushed up to see Lin Yi, as if he was facing a powerful enemy. The man was around 30 years old, with an unprepossessing appearance. He was the type of person who'd be easily overlooked in a crowd. This type of person was perfect for a bodyguard. Guangbo let out a breath of relief when he saw the man walk in, a relaxed expression on his face. He knew how strong a bodyguard was, and although Lin Yi was strong, he wasn't a match for this man. Huang, kill him! Xia, Guangbo ordered the man who just came in. This person who could threaten his life, Xia Guangbo, would not let him live in this world. Otherwise, the bodyguard could protect him, but it was impossible for the bodyguard to be by his side 24/7, especially when Lin Yi could sneak into his room without a sound. If there was a first time, there would be a second time. Guangbo was afraid of this kind of ability. If Lin Yi attacked him without alerting him next time, it would be difficult for him to escape. However, as he shouted, he'd already flown up and threw a punch at Lin Yi. "Who are you?" "Ha." Lin Yi smiled faintly as he raised his fist. He didn't move from his spot, as if he was welcoming someone. The man was stunned. He didn't expect Lin Yi to take his punch head-on. This made him feel incredulous, and he increased the strength of his fist. He was ready to kill Lin Yi with one punch. Chapter 3:11. More Than Life Bang. A loud sound rang out, and Lin Yi didn't move an inch from where he stood. Huang, on the other hand, flew out in a straight line, landing on the wall in front of the room with another bang. The wall caved in, and the decorative picture frame fell to the ground, hitting Huang's head. Huang, however, was already unconscious, lying there motionless with a trail of black blood at the corner of his mouth. Lin Yi hadn't used his full strength after all. An early-phase golden-class master wasn't worth it at all. Lin Yi had only reflected Huang's attack back at him. It was the same as punching himself. It wasn't enough to take Huang's life, but he'd have to stay in bed for a while. Lin Yi was here to negotiate with Guangbua, not to kill him. As for his bodyguard, Lin Yi wouldn't kill him. Just who are you?" Guangbua didn't expect his bodyguard to die before Lin Yi could even finish one move. Of course, he didn't know that Huang was still alive. As far as he was concerned, Huang hadn't moved at all after flying out. What else could it be other than dead? "I told you I'm Mingyao's bodyguard. Or maybe I'm not her bodyguard. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Lin Yi shrugged. "But now, can you sign the shares transfer agreement with me? I don't want to kill anyone, so don't force me." Guangbua was a little dispirited. Huang was his only hope, and he knew how strong he was. He was a legendary golden-class master. If Huang hadn't owed him a favor back then, a master of that level wouldn't have come to protect him. But a master of that level had been killed by Lin Yi. This shocked and terrified Guangbua. "I can't transfer the shares to you." Guangbua shook his head. "Absolutely not. So you want to die?" Lin Yi was a little annoyed. There were people who cared about money more than their lives. This was the first time. This guy was obviously scared out of his wits, but when it came to shares, he refused to budge. "I don't want to." Guangbua shook his head, his eyes flashing with determination. "I can't give you the shares, even if I die." Lin Yi really didn't know what to say. He really wanted to slap this guy in front of him to death. Lin Yi picked up the door plank of the safe. He wanted to give Guangbua another shock. He wanted to bend the plank to scare him, but Guangbua misunderstood. He thought that Lin Yi had lost his patience and was about to kill him. Guangbua suddenly said, "Wait, don't kill me. I can give you the shares, but you have to wait for a few days." "How many days?" Lin Yi was taken aback. "At least after Jin Gubong becomes the chairman of the company, I'll give all my shares to you." "Xia," Guangbua said, "even if I go to jail, it doesn't matter. You can kill me and I'll give you the shares, but I can't do it now." Guangbua's words confused Lin Yi. He had to wait for Jin Gubong to become the chairman before giving him the shares. He could even kill him afterwards. Was there such a ridiculous thing in the world? Was this Jin Gubong his father or grandfather? Was he really worth doing this for? "What did Jin Gubong give you?" Lin Yi frowned. "My son, he's studying abroad, but he got addicted to gambling and drugs. He owes the local mafia 100 million, and they've got him under their control. They'll kill him if I don't give them the money." Guangbua knew that if he didn't explain things to Lin Yi wouldn't let him go. He might even kill him in a fit of rage. "Oh, you're saying that Jin Gubong paid for your son's debt?" Lin Yi frowned. So that was the reason? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. What a pitiful parent. In order to save his son, Xia Guangbua would rather die than to transfer his shares to him. But in order to save his son, he could give up his shares and life. No, he doesn't have that much liquid cash. And neither do I, Guangwa smiled bitterly. My son owes them US dollars. The 40 million I have in my bank account is just a drop in the bucket. But Jean Gubong has promised me that he'll let me use the company's funds after he becomes the chairman. Fuck. Lin, he really wanted to curse. This Jean Gubong was quite mean. Agreeing to something like that, it seemed like he was willing to do anything to become the chairman, sacrificing the company's profits for this position. Where's your son? I'll bring him back, and you'll give me the shares. Linny didn't use a questioning tone at the end, but a commanding tone instead. It was an unquestionable order. Guangwa blinked. What? You don't believe in my strengths? Lin narrowed his eyes at Guangwa. No, of course not. Guangwa quickly shook his head. What a joke. How could he dare doubt Lin Yi's strength now? Even Huang was beaten to a point where he didn't even know if he was dead or alive. Strength like that was rare in this world. But as strong as he was up against a foreign mafia. Could he really bring his son back? Do you really think your son will come back safe and sound after giving them money? Lin Yi looked at Guangwa mockingly. Why don't you use your brain and think about it? Do you think they'll let a money tree like this go? Drug and gambling addictions are the hardest to kick. As long as he's still alive, you'll just have to prepare more money next time. Guangwa didn't deny it. He agreed with Lin Yi's words in his heart. This wasn't the first time his son had asked for money, but there were all sorts of reasons he'd come up with before, but none of them had asked for as much as this time. He'd offended some powerful people. He wanted to buy a car. His girlfriend ran away with someone. Guangwa told his son to come back as soon as possible after giving him the money, but his son didn't seem to listen at all. Now that he thought about it, Lin Yi was probably telling the truth. His son was using the money to pay off his debt and loan sharks. I'll give you 1 second to think. Do you want to die now? Or do you want to bring your son back and give me the shares? Lin Yi looked at Guangwa as he slowly raised the safe. All right, 1 second's up. Wait. Guangwa quickly waved his hand. I agree. Chapter 3:12. Yao Yao's complaint. Lin Yi looked at Guangwa and nodded, satisfied. He threw the safe down. Let's put off Jean Gubong. I'll get your son back in a week. Don't try anything funny, or you and your son. Lin Yi didn't finish his sentence, but Guangwa understood what he meant. Don't worry, as long as my son's fine. I'll cooperate with you no matter what. Guangwa had thought it through as well. Lin Yi really bringing his son back would be for the best. He'd have no shares and no money, but he'd be able to let his son live a hard life like a normal person. Without the money for drugs and gambling, his son might be able to walk the right path. I hope you'll do as you say. Lin Yi looked at Guangwa deeply, noticing that his eyes were clear. I'll fulfill your wish. As well, give me your son's information and send it to my voicemail. My phone number is 152x times 1234. I'll send it to you in a bit. May I ask, Huang? Guangwa asked carefully. He won't die. A golden class master like him only needs half a month to recover. Lin Yi said with a wave of his hand. Guangwa's heart skipped a beat. Lin Yi could see through Huang's strength so easily. What kind of strength did he have then? But the stronger Lin Yi was, the happier Guangwa was. It was the only way Lin Yi could bring his son back from the mafia. Lin Yi didn't jump out the window this time. He walked out the front door with a swagger, disappearing from Guangwa's sight in the Beetle. Beetle? Guangwa blinked. He glanced at the license plate and remembered that it was Yushu's, Menyao's best friend's car. Was he really one of Menyao's people? But Guangwa couldn't believe that a master like that would be Menyao's bodyguard. How was that possible? Even Pengzhan's Faubert wasn't as strong as him. Was he? Guangwa shook his head and stopped guessing Lin Yi's identity. There was no point in guessing. He just needed to follow Lin Yi's instructions. She called Nurse Wang in the servant's room and asked her to send Huang back to his room. Since Lin Yi said that Huang was fine, it should be fine. When he entered the room, Huang was already awake. He opened his eyes with difficulty and looked at Guangbua. Mr. Xie, I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you. Don't say any more. The other party was very powerful. Are you all right? Do you need to go to the hospital? Guangbua waved his hand. He couldn't blame Huang for being weaker than him. Huang had tried his best. No, I'll be fine after some rest. Huang shook his head. He's at least a late-phase golden class. Mr. Xie, you're not hurt? No. Guangbua smiled bitterly. A late-phase golden class was 2 levels higher than Huang. Naturally, Huang wouldn't be a match for a master like that. Lin Yi drove back to the villa area only to find that Peng Zhan's car was still there. Peng Zhan wasn't in the car anymore, but Faubert was sitting quietly in the driver's seat. Where's Uncle Chu? Lin Yi asked after parking the car. In the villa. Mr. Chu told you to go find him when you got back. Faubert nodded to Lin Yi. Lin Yi entered the villa to see Peng Zhan talking to Meng Yao on the sofa. Yushu was watching TV on the side as well. Meng Yao wasn't happy to see Lin Yi so late. Daddy, look at Lin Yi. He's always so late. You're the one who hired him 24 hours a day. How can he be so undisciplined? Meng Yao said as she looked at Lin Yi proudly. Let's see if you still dare to go out and flirt with other girls. My daddy's here now. You've caught him red-handed, haven't you? Let's see how you explain this. But, to Meng Yao's surprise, Peng Zhan interrupted before Lin Yi could explain. Yao, Lin Yi went to do something for me. Don't talk nonsense. Plus, Lin Yi takes care of your studies during the day and stays by your side at night. What kind of work discipline is that? Can't he have his own things to do? Daddy. Meng Yao wasn't expecting to be scolded instead of Lin Yi. She glared at Lin Yi with an unhappy face. This guy, how could he be protected by her daddy like this? If it weren't for the fact that she was her mother's only child and that her father wasn't a playboy, she would have thought that Lin Yi was her father's bastard. All right, Yi, come with me for a bit. Yeah, let's go to your room. Peng Zhan didn't bother with his daughter. He'd been busy with company matters, and in order not to worry his daughter, he'd forced a smile on his face as he talked to her about her studies. Now that Lin Yi was back, Peng Zhan couldn't wait to know the results. Okay, Uncle Chu. Lin Yi nodded before entering his room with Peng Zhan. Peng Zhan was getting impatient the moment he closed the door. How did it go? What did Guangbua say? He won't be hanging out with Jean Gubong for the next couple of days, but I'll have to go overseas for a while. Lin Yi said. Abroad? What's going on? Peng Zhan was delighted to hear that Guangbua wouldn't be supporting Jean Gubong. As long as Guangbua didn't interfere, Jean Gubong wouldn't be able to do anything on his own. Xie, Guangbua's son, owes the mafia a loan of $100 million. Lin Yi explained simply. Guangbua supported Jean Gubong as the new chairman because Jean Gubong agreed to let him use the company's funds to pay off his son's debt. So that's the reason. Peng Zhan said, Then you're going overseas, bringing his son back in exchange. Lin Yi said, casually, But don't worry, Uncle Chu. It's only a 10-hour trip, and 2 days is more than enough. 2 days, and you'll be able to bring him back. Peng Zhan blinked, but nodded at the thought of Lin Yi's efficiency and skills. Then I'll have to trouble you. Be careful, but I'll have to trouble Faubert for a few days. I'm afraid that Guangbua's sudden betrayal will drive Jean Gubong to the wall, and he might do something extreme. Lin Yi said, I'd have him disappear if I wasn't afraid of causing trouble for you. Chapter 313. Chapter 313. Small matter. Peng Zhan's words warmed Lin Yi's hearts. It seemed that Peng Zhan wasn't treating him as a hired person. He was caring for someone younger than him. Uncle Chu, actually, this is really a small matter. Lin Yi felt very blessed right now. Someone cared for him every day. Was this the life of a normal person? Small matter? This is a small matter? You're about to face a foreign mafia. Peng Zhan said seriously. They're different from the gangsters back in China. They're a bunch of desperados with guns and ammunitions. How am I supposed to answer to Elder Lin if something were to happen to you? Even my father wouldn't let me off the hook. Lin Yi didn't know how old Lin communicated with Pingzhan, but it seemed like the old man didn't know what he'd done in the past, not to mention a mafia leader. He'd even send private armies and mercenary leaders of smaller countries to their deaths. Uncle Chu, you'd know if you knew my old man. Actually, what I'm about to do is really a small matter. Lin Yi explained with a bitter smile. All right, I believe you. Pingzhan nodded after hearing Lin Yi's words. You can just call Faubert and get him to take care of the plane ticket. I'll be going back first. Since Guangbo won't be on Jean Gubam's side anymore, I'll have to reconsider how to deal with Gubam. All right, take care. Uncle Chu. Lin Yi got up and walked Pingzhan to the door. Pingzhan waved his hand and left the villa after a few words with Meng Yao. It was getting late, and Meng Yao and Yushu locked the door and turned off the TV, yawning as they went upstairs to sleep. Lin Yi, on the other hand, sat in front of his computer and logged into his mailbox. As expected, Guangbo had already sent all the information on his son to Lin Yi. Xie Guangbo's son was Xie Jinbiao. He was 19 years old and was an international student. However, he was now brought to a remote town called Blue Town. It was a border town of a small country. Due to its geographical location, public security was very chaotic. The entire town was under the control of the local gangs. Xie Jinbiao was captured there. The Blue Water Gang didn't seem to be afraid of revealing their location to Guangbo because the city was completely under the mafia's control. They didn't think that Guangbo's influence would reach here at all. Even the other gangs nearby would give the Blue Water some face and wouldn't trespass on their territory for no good reason. Of course, the Blue Water leader didn't think Guangbo had the ability to do, so even if he did, life or death was up to the Blue Water Gang's whims once they entered the city. The headquarters of the Blue Water Gang was located in the ancient Blue Castle of Blue City. The castle had a bit of history and belonged to the owner of the city, a great family that had a glorious era. But that was a thing of the past, since the entire family had been wiped out after offending a powerful being a few decades ago. That was a very powerful family. In the past, the business and political power of the Little Blue City was completely controlled by this family. So when this family was destroyed, this place was in a state of chaos for a period of time. A few years later, Blue Town was taken over by the Blue Water, and order was restored. It was just a small gang after all and couldn't compare to a big family. The city's economy plummeted, and the Blue Water Gang had no choice but to use drugs and gambling to attract tourists. A strange smile appeared on Lin Yi's face as he looked at the information Guangbo had given him. Blue Town? Blue Castle? That name sounded familiar. His assassin master had said that he'd wiped out a trash family before, but Lin Yi couldn't remember if they lived in Blue Castle. Lin Yi called Faubert and asked him to book a plane ticket for tomorrow night. It wouldn't take more than 2 days, and it shouldn't affect his attendance at Kong Xiaobo's birthday party. Lin Yi got a call from Xuemin the next morning. The Lius had already gathered the money for the doctor's treatment. 100 million. They could transfer it over at any time. Lin Yi was amazed by this. Weren't the Lius a little too efficient? They had money so early in the morning? What they didn't know was that Elder Jinhu was the pillar of the Lius. No matter how much money they had to protect him first. I understand, Grandpa Guan. I'll be there in a bit. Lin Yi said. Let them wait. Xuemin smiled and hung up the phone. He told Lu Qianni about Lin Yi's intentions. However, Lu Qianni wasn't angry at all. Everyone was like this, so what if he had to wait for a while? If Lin Yi heard that the money was ready and rushed over, Lu Qianni would even suspect that Lin Yi was a scammer. Now that Lin Yi didn't seem to care, Lu Qianni felt that it was normal. 100 million. If it was any other ordinary teenager, they might not know what to do. How big of a number was that? But Lin Yi had asked for 100 million straight away, as if he didn't care about it at all. Lu Qianni felt that Lin Yi was very confident that he could cure his old man's illness. That was why he dared to ask for such a price. Lu Qianni had Wu Huiru get ready to wake up the old man, while he contacted his subordinates to prepare the money as soon as possible. It wouldn't be fun if Lin Yi turned around and left in a rage before the money was ready. Lin Yi put his phone down and went to the kitchen. He needed breakfast every day anyway, so he'd bring some for Meng Yao and Yushu along the way. Come to think of it, the girls were quite pitiful. Their parents were busy with work, and they didn't have anyone to take care of them. They were in their 12th year of high school, studying late into the night with severe lack of sleep. How was this the life of a miss? The two were smart, but there were too many smart people in the college entrance exam. In the end, it still depended on who had the most preparation. Being smart wasn't enough to get good grades. This was something Lin Yi admired. Even if they didn't take the college entrance exams, Peng Zhan could have easily found a good university for them with his strength alone. Yet, they relied on their own hard work to get good grades. This was a fundamental difference from Zhong Pingliang, who only knew how to eat and wait for death. Chapter 3:14. Pingliang. Depressed Lin Yi drove his old van to school, following Falbert's Bentley from afar. Actually, Falbert's skills were more than enough for him to handle emergencies. There weren't many people who would attack this bulletproof Bentley on the way to school. Lin Yi saw Tang Yun, Kang Xiaobo, and Lu Xinwen getting off the bus when they were almost at school. He didn't think that they would bump into each other in the morning. Lin Yi had heard that Kang Xiaobo and Tang Yun were going the same way, but Kang Xiaobo didn't know Kang Xiaobo before. Now, Kang Xiaobo could officially stand together with Tang Yun, his sister-in-law. Didi. Lin Yi pressed the horn twice. Xiaobo frowned as he turned around to see an old van. What the hell was an old van honking for? Plus, the road was wide, and there was nothing in the way. But Tang Yun looked at the bun and found it familiar. She looked at the person in the driver's seat, and a smile appeared on her face. That smile made Lin Yi a little dazed, and he almost drove the car over. Fortunately, his reflexes were quick, or it would have been a tragedy. Is that boss? Kang Xiaobo saw that it was Lin Yi who was driving. He ran over with his backpack and jumped in. He called out to Tang Yun and Lu Xinwen, "You guys get in too?" Tang Yun was a bit bashful. They were almost at school. Why would they need to take a car? Wouldn't it be fine to just walk? Okay. Lu Xinwen replied and pulled Tang Yun into the van. "Boss, is this your car?" Kang Xiaobo looked at the broken van, speechless. This was completely different from the boss Lin he knew. You guessed it right. This is my car. Lin Yi handed the license to Kang Xiaobo. "I just got it yesterday." Kang Xiaobo looked at the license and saw that it was indeed Lin Yi's name. He was speechless. This car really belonged to Lin Yi. Was the Beetle really borrowed? "Boss, is this the car you mentioned yesterday?" Kang Xiaobo handed the license back to Lin Yi. "Yeah, I'm actually really poor, but I have a rich relative. It's already good enough that I can drive this car." Lin Yi smiled. Lin Yi's words touched Kang Xiaobo and Lu Xinwen. Lin Yi didn't seem to be the young master they were talking about. However, it was commendable for him to use all his money to pay for Xiaofen's medical fees. Tang Yun had long noticed that Lin Yi was different from others. She was curious about Lin Yi. Lin Yi didn't look like a young master, but sometimes Lin Yi was even more arrogant than those young masters. As for this car, Tang Yun was familiar with it. It seemed to be the car that was snatched from Heibao that night, and Lin Yi took it for himself. Although Tang Yun didn't approve of this robbery, Heibao was too much. Being punished by Lin Yi with a car was already very light. Of course, Tang Yun didn't know that Heibao was still lying in the hospital's intensive care unit. The bones in his body were all broken. It would take at least half a year for him to recover. Lin Yi parked the car in the food street behind the school and the four entered the school together. The students of the school were already used to these four people who were often together. Even Wang Jifeng, the Dean of Academic Affairs, was not used to them and nodded at them. Dean Wang. Lin Yi suddenly remembered that he was going abroad and wanted to ask for a leave. Oh, Lin Yi, what's the matter? Wang Jifeng squeezed a smile on his face. He already had a shadow in his heart. Every time he had an affair with the female teacher, he couldn't help but think about it. Linny knew about it, so when Linny called him, he couldn't help but think about the affair with the female teacher. This was a strange circle, the cycle of cause and effect, repeated over and over again. However, Wang Jifeng was a bit afraid. This kid always did things that made him feel embarrassed. Would he find him for something? Well, I might have something to do these 2 days. I need to ask for a few days of leave. Is that okay? Lin Yi asked. If that's the case, of course it's okay. Go do what you need to do. I'll tell your homeroom teacher. Wang Jifeng heard this and immediately calmed down. Jifeng calmed down after hearing that. It wasn't a big deal at all, and it wasn't the first time Lin Yi skipped class either. After Wang Jifeng left, Kong Xiaobo was a bit curious. Boss, you need to ask for a leave? What do you need to do? You won't miss my second grandpa's birthday this weekend, right? Tang Yin also widened her eyes and stared at Lin Yi. She also wanted to ask, but Kong Xiaobo asked first. Only Lu Xinwen wasn't interested. Whether Lin Yi went to school or not didn't have much to do with her. I was invited to treat a patient. Lin Yi naturally couldn't say that he was going abroad, so he said it with a lie. Treat? You know how to treat patients? Right? You know, acupuncture. Lu Xinwen was a bit surprised, but she suddenly remembered what happened with Xiaofan and nodded. I'm just going to help. Lin Yi smiled. That's not bad. Kong Xiaobo gave a thumbs up in admiration. Boss, hurry up and improve your medical skills. It would be great if you can treat Xiaofan. I will work hard. Lin Yi nodded. Kong Xiaobo and Tang Yin knew that Lin Yi had some medical skills, so they didn't find it strange that Lin Yi went to see a patient. Last time, Lin Yi told Tang Yun that he had a way to treat Xiaofan's illness, but he couldn't do it now. So Tang Yun and Kong Xiaobo naturally thought that Lin Yi was talking about his medical skills not being enough. Tang Yun wanted to ask Lin Yi if he could take a look at her father's illness, but she remembered that Lin Yi couldn't do anything for Xiaofan, so she didn't ask. When they entered the class, Meng Yao and Yushu were already sitting on their seats. Lin Yi and Kong Xiaobo walked in, and the two raised their heads to look at Lin Yi before going back to their work. Pin Liang was depressed. He had said that he was going to write a letter of love to Meng Yao yesterday, but it ended because of the bloody mess. No one brought it up today, but Pin Liang felt like everyone was looking at him strangely. It was almost as if they were mocking him. Pin Liang didn't know if it was his imagination playing tricks on him, but he felt a little uneasy. Chapter 315. You're being insincere, HM? Xiaofu paused. You're still writing it? Yeah, I sent out the news yesterday, saying that I'm writing a letter of blood to Meng Yao. There was an accident, but what do you think people will think of me if I don't write it? Won't they think I'm a coward? Pin Liang asked. This. Gao Xiaofu put down his bag and said hesitantly, Liangji, to be honest, a man should always keep his word. I feel that whether or not people laugh at this matter and how they view it, it has nothing to do with you. What matters is what Meng Yao thinks. Meng Yao's attitude is the key. That's right. Pin Liang slapped his thigh, suddenly enlightened. Fu, you're the one who woke me up from my daydream. It's true, what other people think has nothing to do with me. It's Meng Yao's attitude that matters. But how do I know what Meng Yao thinks? Does she want me to write her a letter of blood or not? That Xiaofu wasn't sure. Maybe you can ask her. How am I supposed to ask her? Fu, maybe you can ask Yushu. She's good friends with Meng Yao. You can ask her. Pin Liang suggested. That works too. I'll ask her. Xiaofu nodded and took out his phone, sending Yushu a text. With modern communication tools like phones, there was no need for him to ask her personally anymore. Miss Yushu, may I ask what Miss Meng Yao thinks about Liang Bro's letter of blood yesterday? Xiaofu's text was very politely. He was afraid that Meng Yao would ignore him. It wasn't long before Xiaofu received Yushu's reply. Yao Yao said that Liangzi's hands are only good as a water gun. Forget about the letter of blood. Xiaofu wanted to laugh, but didn't dare. He handed the phone to Pin Liang. Pin Liang didn't quite understand after reading the text. Fu, what do you think she means? Liang Bro, forgive me for being blunt, but I think Meng Yao looks down on you. Xiaofu said carefully. Despise? Pin Liang paused and looked at the message. There was indeed a hint of disdain in it. He panicked. Fu, what should we do? Indeed, it's as if Yushu is laughing at me for not being able to write a blood letter. Brother Liang, why don't you write another blood letter? Prove to them that it's not that you can't do it, that what happened yesterday was just an accident. Gao Xiaofu suggested. That's fine. Pin Liang nodded. This was the only way. Xiaofu quickly prepared a new piece of paper for Pin Liang. Pin Liang held the carving knife in his hand, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. It wasn't that he was afraid of pain. It was just that yesterday's incident had left a lingering fear in his heart. What if he cut his finger and caused it to bleed profusely? Pin Liang hesitated. Liang Bro, what's wrong? Xiaofu asked, noticing Pin Liang's hesitation. Xiaofu, I don't dare to do it anymore. What happened yesterday was 2F * king scary. Pin Liang's hand was shaking as he held the carving knife. Plus, if he were to cut it today, he'd have to get a new finger. No wonder you couldn't get Yao Yao after all this time. Yushu curled her lips as she spoke, a look of disdain on her face. Chapter 3:16. The best partner. You don't have to go back. You can do it here. Yushu said with a half-smile as she looked at the Band-Aid on Pin Liang's hand. Other than the cut on his index finger yesterday, Pin Liang had also wrapped a Band-Aid around his right middle finger to confuse Meng Yao and Yushu. He couldn't let them know that today's blood letter was written with Gao Xiaofu's blood. After all. Here? Pin Liang paused before a bitter smile appeared on his face. The wound on my hand has dried up. I'll have to go back and get a carving knife. Oh, it's fine. I have a carving knife here. I'll lend it to you. With that, Yushu pulled out a carving knife from her bag like magic and handed it to Pin Liang. Pin Liang sweated. Why was he so unlucky? He had thought that he had escaped death, but he did not expect that he would still have to cut his finger. Yushu was right here, too, and it wouldn't be right if he didn't do it. Pin Liang's face was covered in cold sweat. It's not a good idea to do it here, is it? What if the blood spurts out everywhere and scares you guys? I say, Liangi, you don't get it, do you? Yushu said. How could I let you go back? I still want to see you bleed nonstop. She pretended to be teaching him a lesson. Cut your finger in front of the girl you love and sign your name on the blood letter in front of her. That's the only way to show how much you love her. Is that so? Pin Liang was starting to get excited. Then I'll do it now. What are you waiting for? Yushu asked back. Then, all right. Pin Liang's face lit up with determination. Meng Yao was amused. This Shu really didn't bat an eyelid when it came to messing with people. Zhong Pin Liang was in big trouble because of Shu, but she hated Pin Liang, so she didn't try to stop him. However, it was also because of Meng Yao's indifferent attitude that Pin Liang thought that she was agreeing to it. Under normal circumstances, Meng Yao would have kicked him out impatiently if she didn't like him, but this time, Meng Yao didn't say anything, which meant that she agreed. This made Pin Liang even more determined. He took the carving knife from Yushu, wondering which finger he should cut this time. While Pin Liang was hesitating, Yushu sent a message to Lin Yi. Shield Bro, Pin Liang's cutting his finger again. Please come help. Pin Liang gripped the carving knife, gritting his teeth as if he'd made a difficult decision. Abruptly, he cut off his right thumb. He could only cut this finger. It was not convenient to write on the other fingers. Linny looked at the message on his phone and stood up slowly. He walked over to Pin Liang, a smile on his face when he saw him cut his finger. It seemed like the kid hadn't learned his lesson from yesterday. Don't block the way, Lin Yi said as he pulled on Pin Liang's arm, causing him to stumble. Pin Liang was just about to sign his name when Lin Yi's voice came from behind him, startling him. He thought that Lin Yi was going to kick him again, but after the push, Lin Yi strode over without hesitation. Phew, Pin Liang breathed out in relief. It seemed like Lin Yi didn't do anything to him because he was in a hurry to go to the washroom. Wah! Yushu pointed at Pin Liang's finger excitedly. Liang, your finger's bleeding. That's so cool. Do you have superpowers? Is this the legendary six-pulse blade? Pin Liang blinked, not understanding what Yushu was talking about. He lowered his head to continue writing, only to realize that the paper was already soaked in blood. His hand, on the other hand, blood was gushing out like a fountain, just like yesterday. Ah! Pin Liang yelped as he tossed the blood letter aside and ran back to his seat. Phoo! Band-aids, give me a Band-aid. Yushu raised two fingers in a V shape as she watched Pin Liang run away. She cheered happily. Yay! Success! Shield bro, and I work well together. Meng Yao didn't know what to say as she looked at her best friend. She was now certain that Pin Liang's bleeding yesterday had to have been caused by Lin Yi. Before Lin Yi came over, Pin Liang's finger was still bleeding very slowly, but after Lin Yi came over, the blood was gushing out like a fountain. It was obviously Lin Yi's doing. Lin Yi and Yushu, they really were a match made in heaven, the prankster duo. It'd be hard for Pin Liang not to be crippled in the future. Meng Yao's heart ached a little at the thought of Yushu and Lin Yi being a match made in heaven. She had to admit that Yushu and Yushu were very similar in some ways. Hee, Yao, what do you think? Feels good, right? Let's see if Pin Liang dares write that blood letter again. Yushu turned back to look at Pin Liang, only to see him trying to wrap a Band-aid around his wound. One Band-aid wasn't enough to stop the blood anymore. Pin Liang had no choice but to wrap it around his finger with cellophane tape. Only this sort of airtight tape could stop the wound. Pin Liang found it strange. How did his finger end up like this? It had never happened before. Lin Yi went to the washroom and returned to the classroom. Yushu winked at him and made a victory sign with her hand. Lin Yi smiled. Boss, why did you go out just now? Didn't you see that amazing scene? Kong Xiaobo looked at Lin Yi with a pitiful expression. Oh, what's wrong? Lin Yi asked with a smile as he sat down in his seat. You didn't see it, but Pin Liang started spewing blood again. It was spectacular. I've never seen anyone bleed like that before. Kong Xiaobo said. You didn't see it, but it's even worse than yesterday. The blood was shooting out of his hand. Ah, is that so? Lin Yi said. Of course it was worse than yesterday. He'd only sped up his blood circulation yesterday, but he'd raised his blood pressure today. Lin Yi's phone vibrated again as he spoke. He'd received a text. Chapter 3:17. I don't understand, Kong Xiaobo asked curiously. Boss, whose text is it? It can't be from sis-in-law Tang Yun, right? What Tang Yun? She doesn't even have a phone. Lin Yi glared at Kong Xiaobo. It's the weather report. Oh, Kong Xiaobo remembered that Lin Yi was going to buy a phone with Tang Yun at noon. He was going to buy one for Xiaofan as well. At noon, Lin Yi, Tang Yun, Kong Xiaobo, and Lu Xinwen left the school together. Lin Yi had an old van, so he didn't need to take a taxi anymore. Although the car wasn't good, it was better than nothing. Tang Yun, Kong Xiaobo, wants to buy a phone for Xiaofan. It'll be easier to contact her. What about you? Lin Yi asked Tang Yun, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. Kong Xiaobo gave the seat to Tang Yun and sat in the back with Lu Xinwen. Me? I'm not buying it. I don't have much use for it. Tang Yun shook her head. Her family situation didn't allow her to buy a phone. Although it wasn't expensive, she would need to buy a SIM card and a monthly rental fee. It wasn't a small amount, so Tang Yun rejected it. Boss will pay for it. Xiaobo continued. Fun's phone was a gift from my boss, sis-in-law. She'd never accept it if he bought her a phone if you didn't want it. Sis-in-law, please help me. Tang Yun couldn't help but giggle after hearing Kong Xiaobo's words, begging someone to buy a phone for them. However, Tang Yun remembered that Lin Yi bought her a dress at the night market and asked her for 50 kuai. Thinking about it, it was strange sometimes. Back then, she had hated him to death, but now, she was sitting quietly in his car, sitting beside him. She'd thrown the dress in her closet because she was mad. But she'd probably be able to find it when she got home tonight. Tang Yun couldn't help but smile at the thought. Would she have accepted the dress if he'd given it to her? The answer was no. But now Lin Yi wanted to buy her a phone, and after some persuasion from Kong Xiaobo, Tang Yun acquiesced. Lin Yi parked the car in front of a mobile phone store, and the four of them got out of the car together. When the salesperson saw that the four of them were wearing school uniforms, he knew that they were students. He immediately recommended a few cheap cell phones. Kong Xiaobo also wanted to buy a cheaper phone. He didn't want Lin Yi to spend money on a smartphone that easily cost a few thousand yuan. What price range do you want to buy? The salesperson asked. Kong Xiaobo wanted to say 200 or 300 yuan, but Lin Yi had to make the decision, so he turned to look at Lin Yi. Lin Yi knew that Kong Xiaobo wanted to buy a cheaper one. According to his plan yesterday, he wanted to buy 200 or 300 yuan, but Lin Yi didn't want to buy one that was too cheap for Tang Yun. If he bought one that was 200 or 300 yuan for Xiaofan, Lin Yi naturally wouldn't buy one that was too expensive for Tang Yun. Differential treatment. And it wouldn't be good if Xiaofan had any ideas. Around 1,000 yuan, Lin Yi thought about it and set a price. Tang Yun wouldn't be able to accept a price that was too expensive, so this price should be about right. Nokia 5233. This phone is very popular among students. It's cheap and has all the functions, but it lacks the GPS function compared to the 5230. But you students won't need that function anyway. The salesperson took out a phone and introduced it to Lin Yi and the others. The price is cheaper than the 5230, only 833 yuan. What do you think? Lin Yi pushed the phone to Tang Yun, asking for her opinion. It's pretty good, but it's a bit expensive. Tang Yun still couldn't accept the fact that she wanted something from Lin Yi. Although Kong Xiaobo tried to persuade her for a long time, she still felt that she shouldn't buy it. Heh. Lin Yi smiled and said to the salesperson, then I'll take 3 of these phones. How about we buy the 300 yuan one? Tang Yun saw that Lin Yi wanted to buy it, so she hesitated and pointed at the 300 yuan phone. Please, Kong Xiaobo is giving it to Fun. It's too shabby. He can't take it out, right? Lin Yi whispered. Oh. Tang Yun could only nod, but she felt a bit depressed in her heart. She owed Lin Yi more and more. How could she pay him back? From the barbecue recipe to him helping her and her mother chase away those bullies to Fun's medical fees, although Kong Xiaobo played a part in it, most of it was because of her face. So Tang Yun couldn't pretend that she didn't know anything. He saved her again. Now he wanted to buy a phone for her. Tang Yun didn't know if her relationship with Lin Yi would become more and more complicated if this continued. Did he really like her? While he was hesitating, Lin Yi had already bought 3 phones and 2 SIM cards. One of them was Fun's birthday, and the other was Tang Yun's birthday. Xinwen was in charge of both of them. Lin Yi swiped the card and distributed the phones. Tang Yun got one, Kong Xiaobo got one, and Lu Xinwen had an older phone, so she didn't need to buy it. Lin Yi used the last one for himself. The expensive phone from before was also broken, so Lin Yi bought a cheap one. No matter how expensive it would be ruined if it was soaked in water. Lin Yi's job was more dangerous, so he chose a cheap phone. If it wasn't for the fact that Yushu's phone was too feminine, and Lin Yi didn't want to take it out, Lin Yi would just use it. Tang Yun sighed lightly. She owed him a lot. She owed him a lot already, so a phone wouldn't make much of a difference. But when she got in the car, she whispered to Lin Yi, "Thank you." "Huh." Lin Yi smiled and turned his head to look at Tang Yun mischievously. "Then how are you going to thank me?" "Wah, how am I going to thank you?" Tang Yun jumped and blushed, remembering what she promised him yesterday at the hospital. Her heart raced. "Yesterday at the hospital, you still owe me a kiss?" Lin Yi said in a low voice. As expected, he was talking about that. Tang Yun blushed. "Wah, what? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand." Chapter 3:18. A moment of brilliance. Lin Yi drove Tang Yun, Kong Xiaobo, and Lu Xinwen to the entrance of the hospital. Then, "I'll be leaving?" Tang Yun hugged the phone, feeling a bit uneasy. It was the first time she'd received such an expensive gift from someone, and it was from a boy. Tang Yun couldn't calm down for a long time. "Yeah, I won't be using my phone for the next few days. Text me if there's anything. I'll check it after I turn it on." Lin Yi said, "You can take a taxi with Xiaobo later. Let him pay." "Ha ha." And Tang Yun couldn't help but smile as she listened to Lin Yi's words. Her smile was like a blooming flower. Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat as he grabbed Tang Yun's hand and pulled her back. What are you doing?" Tang Yun froze and looked at Kong Xiaobo and Lu Xinwen, who'd already gotten out of the car. She let out a breath of relief when she saw that they weren't looking at her. "Aren't you going to say something before we leave?" Lin Yi pointed at his face. I'll say it again." Tang Yun couldn't stand Lin Yi's teasing. She struggled out of Lin Yi's hand and ran out of the car. Her heart raced as she let out a long breath. She looked at Lin Yi and pouted before turning around and ignoring him. If it had been anyone else, Tang Yun would have run away crying. But with Lin Yi, all she felt was shyness. Tang Yun, who suddenly realized this, started to feel lost. Was it a good thing for her to fall deeper and deeper in love with Lin Yi? "Yun, what's wrong? You don't look well?" Lu Xinwen was talking to Kong Xiaobo when she looked up to see Tang Yun's reddened face. It was like she had a heat stroke. It's nothing." Tang Yun quickly shook her head. Let's go." Xinwen shook her head. She didn't know what happened to Tang Yun. She turned around to look at Lin Yi's car, but realized that Lin Yi's car was already far away. She could only bury the question in her heart. Before leaving the country, Lin Yi had to deal with Lu Jinhu's illness first. While he could extort some money from the man, he could also give Xuemin time to start planning for the medical company. This incident made Lin Yi realize that it was better to be on time than to be on time. He was just thinking about how to get 100 million yuan of startup capital, and in the blink of an eye, the Lu family sent it to him. The efficiency of raising funds was probably unmatched. Lin Yi gave Guan Xuemin a call and told him to call Jinhu and the others over. He'd be there soon. "All right, Lu Qianni's already waiting here, waiting for your news. He'll have someone bring Elder Lu here." Xuemin said, "Have you had lunch?" "Not yet, but there's no rush." Lin Yi said, "All right then, I'll have Xian prepare some food." Xuemin made the decision for Lin Yi. All right. Lin Yi didn't argue about these trivial things and drove straight to Xuemin's house. By the time Lin Yi got there, Jinhu was already there. He was sitting in the living room waiting for Lin Yi. When he saw Lin Yi walk in, Jinhu stood up with Lu Qianni's help. "Miracle doctor, I'll have to trouble you then." Jinhu's attitude made Lin Yi a little embarrassed. He took so much money from him, and he was still being so respectful to him. But he really needed money right now, so he couldn't be soft-hearted. Plus, he couldn't be blamed for this. They only had themselves to blame for marrying a snobbish daughter-in-law and having a retarded nephew. Elder Lu, you don't have to be so polite. Lin Yi waved his hand. Let's go find an empty room. All right, Miracle Dr. Lin, about the consultation fee, Lu Qianni wasn't an idiot. Even if Lin Yi didn't ask about the consultation fee, he could not mention it. If he pretended not to know, then he'd be an idiot. Grandpa Guan, do you have a bank account? Transfer it directly. Lin Yi turned to Xuemin. Transfer it to my account? Xuemin paused for a moment, then understood that Lin Yi wanted him to plan for the medical company. He nodded. All right, transfer it to my account first. Mr. Lu, do you know my account number? I do. Lu Qianni nodded. He'd planned to transfer 2 million to Xuemin as well, so he'd memorized Xuemin's number. Lu Qianni called one of his subordinates and had them transfer the 100 million to Xuemin's account. A moment later, Xuemin's phone rang with a notification. After confirming that there were no issues, Lin Yi nodded in satisfaction. It seemed that Lu Qianni was a man of his word. He didn't have to completely cut ties with him in the future. But that wife of his was nothing to be proud of. In an empty room upstairs, Lin Yi had Jinhu lie down and asked Xuemin for a box of silver needles. He then looked at Jinhu quietly, not in a hurry to insert the needles. He was thinking about something. He'd already checked on Jinhu's condition the first time they met, so he didn't need to check it again. What he needed to do now was think of a treatment plan, the quickest and most effective way to cure Jinhu's angina. Of course, a complete cure wasn't possible, at least not right now. Old Lin's miraculous pills were hidden away like treasures, so he couldn't take them out even if he wanted to. But it was possible to keep the disease from acting up for 10 years, but that was a bit of a scam. Lin Yi sighed. Whatever. He'd keep the disease under control for 10 years first. If Jinhu really did live to 100 years old, then he'd think of something else. With that in mind, Lin Yi quickly inserted needles into Jinhu's body. His speed was so fast that even Xuemin, the god of acupuncture, was in awe. He did it in one go. 2 minutes later, Lin Yi began inserting needles into each needle. Neguan, Ximen, Yinqi Juk, Shanzhong inject energy into the needles. Jiao Lao's voice suddenly rang in Lin Yi's ears. Lin Yi was overjoyed. He didn't know what kind of person Jiao Lao was, but with his help, things would be much easier. Lin Yi hurriedly did, as he was told. The needle handle that had been injected with energy suddenly began to vibrate with a buzzing sound, as if something was driving it. Even when Lin Yi's hand left the handle, the needles continued to vibrate on Jinhu's body. Chapter 319. A master in disguise, Lu Qianni, who'd been watching Lin Yi's acupuncture, didn't know much about acupuncture, but he was still shocked by what he was seeing the same expression on Guan Xuemin's face. Lu Qianni was even more certain that Lin Yi was a master in disguise. In actuality, Lin Yi was just as shocked as Qianni and Guan Xuemin were. He didn't think that infusing the art of dragon mastery into the needles would result in something like this. Jiao Lao, what's going on? Lin Yi asked. It's normal. Jiao Lao's voice was still calm. Although you can't use the energy from the art of dragon mastery to treat the patient with your first stage, you can still maintain it like last time. Do as I say, and you should be able to make it through 10 years. What? That's it? Lin Yi was pleasantly surprised. In his original plan, he'd planned to use acupuncture and medicine together. As long as the patient kept taking medicine after the acupuncture, he'd be able to control the angina, but he'd have to do acupuncture once a year. Of course, he'd thought of an excuse beforehand. He'd said that he'd check up once a year, and the Lius would be more than happy to bring Jinhu over for acupuncture. That way, he wouldn't go back on his promise, saying that he'd treat Jinhu for 10 years, not all at once. But now he didn't have to worry about that anymore because Jiao Lao's voice sounded. Of course, the pure energy in your body is more than enough to maintain a patient's bodily functions. And that's it. Is that strange? It is. Does that mean other golden class masters can do the same? Lin Yi asked. Didn't I say it before? Only the energy in your body is pure energy. The martial arts they practice produce pure qi, and every martial art has a different type of pure qi. That's why the pure qi produced only works on their own martial arts. If used on others, it'll either be useless or have the opposite effect. Jiao Lao said with a tone of exasperation. Heh, I see. Lin Yi laughed awkwardly. In front of others, Lin Yi could call them idiots, but in front of Jiao Lao, Lin Yi could only laugh dryly. All right, time to put the needles away. Now, follow the order I say, and insert the needles into Jian Shu. Jiao Lao named a few more acupoints. Send the energy in. Lin Yi did as he was told, and the needles danced again. Guan Shuamin was amazed, and Lu Qianni even looked up to Lin Yi as if he was a god. The 100 million was worth it. If he had an argument with Lin Yi because of the 100 million, not only would he have missed out on such a miraculous treatment, but the Lu family would have missed out on a miracle doctor. Phew, Lin Yi let out a long breath. Although he had enough energy in his body, transmitting the energy for a long time still made Lin Yi sweat. After repeating this 3 times, Lin Yi put away the needles, wiped the sweat off his forehead, and said, Done. Done? It wasn't that Lu Qianni didn't trust Lin Yi, but it had only been an hour or so. His father's angina had been treated for so many years, and he had visited countless famous doctors to no avail. How could he be cured in a little more than an hour? Although he had seen the magic of Lin Yi's acupuncture, it was still hard for Lu Qianni to believe that Lin Yi had cured his father's illness in such a short amount of time. But he didn't dare to ask, afraid that he would make Lin Yi unhappy. He could only hold back his questions and look at his father. Dad, how do you feel? Lu Qianni could only ask his father how he felt. Much better. So comfortable. But my body feels so uncomfortable. I need to take a bath. Lu Jinhu felt refreshed, but there was a sticky feeling on his body that was very uncomfortable. Lu Qianni ran over to help his father up, but he was shocked to see a layer of greasy black and yellow dirt on his father's skin. What is this? Guan Shuamin also walked over after being reminded by Lu Qianni. When Lin Yi was performing acupuncture, the two of them were afraid that they would affect Lin Yi, so they stood far behind him. When they got closer, their hands were trembling in shock. Bone and marrow cleansing? Guan Shuamin naturally knew about bone and marrow cleansing in ancient medicine, but it had been lost for many years. Bone and marrow cleansing referred to the use of acupuncture or herbs to expel toxins from the body, achieving an effect similar to rebirth. It was inevitable that toxins would be stored in the body when humans ate grains. Although metabolism could expel some of it, there was still some that would be absorbed by the body. As time went on, the toxins would accumulate more and more. Guan Shuamin didn't expect Lin Yi's acupuncture to be so effective. Not only could it cure diseases, but it could also expel toxins from the body. Lin Yi paused when he heard what Guan Shuamin called him, but then Jiao Yazi's voice sounded in his ears. Lin Yi, your pure energy has a part of the effect of expelling toxins. So even if you didn't do it on purpose, it would still bring about this result. But that Lu Jinhu will probably live a few more years, and you'll have to perform acupuncture on him in 10 years. Lu Jinhu? Lin Yi didn't know what to say, but it wasn't all that strange coming from Jiao Lao's mouth. Jiao Lao was an old monster, and although Lin Yi wanted to ask, Jiao Lao kept saying that he was too weak to know too much, so there was nothing Lin Yi could do. But one thing was for sure. Jiao Lao was far older than Lu Jinhu, which was why he called him kid. Lin Yi smiled, but didn't explain. It seemed that Lu Zhenhu's 100 million hadn't been spent in vain. Not only did it cure his illness, it also extended his life. Good things like this couldn't be bought with money, but since Zhenhu was going to live a few more years, Lin Yi had to give him a heads up. Elder Lu's health isn't good, so I did it for a bit. But I have some bad news for you, Mr. Lu. Oh, what news? Please tell me. Miracle Dr. Lin. Lu Qianni was startled. He'd thought that bone and marrow cleansing was a good thing, and the excitement from Guan Shuamin made him think that his father had gotten a great bargain. But then he heard Lin Yi say that there was bad news. Even the usually calm Lu Zhenhu couldn't help but raise his head. Didn't Lin Yi say that he was cured? Why would there be bad news? Could it be that bone and marrow cleansing was harmful to the body? But why did he feel so good? Chapter 3:20. Let me tell you some bad news, Lin. He wasn't expecting everyone to be looking at him with such nervous gazes. Did he scare them with his tone? Mr. Lu, I said I could cure Elder Lu's illness in 10 years, so it's 10 years. That bone and marrow cleansing thing is a complimentary gift. Lin Yi paused. But the bad news is that you'll need to prepare the money 10 years from now. You'll still need to prepare it. Elder Lu can live for more than 10 years after the bone and marrow cleansing. Ah, Lu Qianni blinked, surprised and overjoyed at the same time. This wasn't bad news at all. It couldn't be any better. How could it be bad news? So what if he had to prepare money after 10 years? As long as his father lived, House Lu would continue to prosper. Lu Qianni was so moved that he couldn't speak. Miracle Dr. Lin, you're the savior of House Lu. Lin Yi waved his hand. All right, I'm tired. I need to rest. Yes, yes. Miracle Dr. Lin needs to rest. I'll take my father to the bath first. Lu Qianni didn't want to disturb Lin Yi any longer. He'd wanted to say some more words of gratitude, but held them back. Zhenhu couldn't help but be overjoyed at Lin Yi's words. Not only would he live for another 10 years, he'd be able to live a few more years on top of that. This was really good news. Qianni, you have to prepare a big gift for young Miracle Dr. Lin after this is over. Consultation fee is consultation fee. Thank you gift is thank you gift. You can't mix the two together. Zhenhu knew how important a miracle doctor was to the family, and naturally he wouldn't let go of any chance to befriend Lin Yi. Zhenhu wouldn't look down on Lin Yi anymore. Age didn't determine one's ambitions. Lin Yi might be young, but he was capable. Yes, Dad, I understand. Lu Qianni quickly nodded and helped his father up. No, I feel like I'm 10 years younger. It's like I've returned to the time when I was in my 70s. My body is very good, and I have strength. Zhenhu waved his hand and stood up, pacing a few steps around the room. Not bad at all. Lu Qianni was even more surprised at this moment. Although he did not doubt the authenticity of Lin Yi's words, it was not as shocking as seeing it with his own eyes. His father, who used to need the help of others to walk and couldn't walk fast, was now walking as if he was flying. Was this still an old man in his 90s? At this moment, Lu Qianni had also made up his mind to build a good relationship with Lin Yi at all costs. This was a rising star in the medical world, after all. His family had to make the first move and wait for the news to spread. All the noble houses would flock to fawn over Lin Yi, and then the Lus would have nothing to do with it. Lu Qianni, Zhenhu, and Shuamin left the room and closed the door for Lin Yi. Lin Yi was a bit tired, but he silently practiced the first stage of the art of dragon mastery in his mind. The energy he had lost was replenished, and he was back to his energetic self. You brat, how can you be so devious? You can't cure his illness, and you're telling him to prepare the money 10 years later for treatment, and he's still grateful to you. Jiao Yazi's voice rang out. Then what should I say? That I didn't cure him? Lin Yi sweated. He really was a bit devious. But you're not devious enough. You're not as devious as my master uncle. If it were him, he would have asked for another bone and marrow cleansing fee. Jiao Yazi said. Lin Yi fainted. When Lin Yi came downstairs, Guan Xian had already placed the dishes on the table. Xinhu and Lu Tianyi hadn't left either. Xinhu had clearly just showered, as his hair was still damp. However, he looked energetic as he chatted with Xuemin about something. Xinhu and Lu Tianyi stood up again when Lin Yi came downstairs. Miracle Dr. Lin, you've worked hard. It's nothing. Is it time to eat? Mr. Lu and Elder Lu, would you like to join us? Lin Yi looked at the food on the table. It was enough for a few people, so he invited them. Then I'll gladly accept your invitation. This old man will shamelessly come and freeload. Xinhu wanted the Lius to get closer to Lin Yi as well, so he immediately accepted Lin Yi's invitation. The Lius were now convinced that Lin Yi really was Xuemin's mentor. Although this was Xuemin's house, it wasn't appropriate for them to stay and eat with Lin Yi. Guan Xian brought out the dishes one by one, and then placed the bowls and chopsticks on the table like a little wife. All right, let's eat together. You must be hungry, right? Let's skip the formalities and get straight to the point. Xuemin was worried that Lin Yi would be too tired, so he asked everyone to get straight to the point. All right. Lin Yi nodded, but noticed Guan Xian standing to the side. Guan Xian, you're here too? Guan Xian looked at Xuemin. In the past, when Xuemin's friends came over, Guan Xian wouldn't join in the fun. After all, she was a junior. Yesterday, it was only Lin Yi, and the two knew each other. So Xuemin wanted to introduce Lin Yi to her. That was why Guan Xian came. But today, Xinhu and Lu Tianyi were here, so it wasn't appropriate for Guan Xian to just sit down. Xian, let's eat together. You can sit next to Yi. Xuemin said with a smile. Okay. Guan Xian nodded, happy as she sat down next to Lin Yi. Lu Tianyi wanted to sit next to Lin Yi to get closer to him, but Guan Xian suddenly sat down. He was a little disappointed, but at the same time, he started to pay more attention to Guan Xian. Guan Xian's shy and happy expression just now was reflected in Lu Tianyi's eyes. Lu Tianyi wasn't an idiot. He could tell Guan Xian's feelings for Lin Yi with just one look. No wonder Lin Yi was so close to House Guan. It was because of this, it seemed that even if he got to know a miracle doctor like Lin Yi, he couldn't cut off his connection with Xuemin. Lu Tianyi made up his mind. Guan Xian put 100% of her effort into cooking today's meal, and it was a world of difference compared to yesterday's. Lin Yi, of course, ate heartily. Guan Xian, on the other hand, ate very little, but she was even happier to see Lin Yi enjoying the food. Lin Yi didn't linger after the meal. He still had to prepare for his trip abroad, and it was about time for him to leave for the airport. His flight was at 4 in the afternoon, and it was already 1. Lu Tianyi and Xinhu were a little disappointed to see Lin Yi leave in a hurry, and so was Guan Xian. Xuemin, on the other hand, didn't mind. He used to look forward to Lin Yi's visits, but now that he had a project with Lin Yi would definitely come more often. Chapter 3:21. Meeting Wang Xinyan at Genfaubert's, Bentley was already parked in front of the villa. Lin Yi parked the van in the garden and opened the door for Faubert. Faubert, wait for me. I need to get changed. Okay, just in time to prepare the things you need to bring. Uncle Fu nodded and said. Lin Yi was wearing a school uniform right now. He couldn't just leave the country like that because it would be too eye-catching. The Songshan First School's uniform wasn't very eye-catching in Songshan, but it wasn't available in other cities, let alone overseas. If Lin Yi were to appear in that uniform, he'd definitely be noticed by the local gangs. Lin Yi changed into the casual clothes he'd bought at the night market and put on a pair of sunglasses. He then took out the blade from his shoe and threw it into the drawer. Something like that wouldn't be able to get past airport security. He'd just buy another one and put it in his shoe when he got there. Lin Yi left his phone on the desk and came out without anything else. You're not bringing anything? Faubert looked at Lin Yi's outfit, a little surprised. What's there to bring? I'm just bringing someone back. Lin Yi shook his head. Faubert didn't say anything as he handed a credit card and plane ticket to Lin Yi. This credit card can be overdrawn up to $1 million USD. The password is the same as the one I gave you before. Lin Yi didn't decline and put the card and plane ticket into his pocket. Lin Yi wasn't a stranger to flying, but this was his first time using Lin Yi's identity. He'd had all sorts of random names when he was on missions before. Lin Yi packed lightly and got on the plane in no time at all. Faubert had bought a first-class ticket. With Pingzhan's wealth, a first-class ticket wasn't much at all. Faubert had bought a transfer ticket that required a transfer at Yanjing. However, as soon as Lin Yi boarded the plane, he closed his eyes and prepared to sleep. Sir, can I go over? Lin Yi's seat was near the aisle. As soon as he got on the plane, he lowered his head as if he was asleep. However, in fact, Lin Yi didn't sleep. He just closed his eyes. When he heard someone talking, he guessed that it might be the passengers sitting inside. So he stood up, but when he saw the person, he was stunned. It's you? Xinyan looked at the man in the big sunglasses. He looked familiar, but she didn't know who he was. You're... Lin Yi was stunned. He then remembered that he was still wearing sunglasses, so he reached out and took them off. What about this time? It's you, Lin Yi. Xinyan looked at Lin Yi, a little surprised. What are you doing here? But then Xinyan realized that her question was a little stupid. They were on a plane, and Lin Yi naturally had to take the plane to Yanjing. Otherwise, he wouldn't be here. Why you're here is why I'm here. Lin Yi shrugged. Do you have luggage? I'll help you put it on. Oh, yeah. Xinyan nodded after a moment of hesitation. She was dragging a suitcase, and it would be a little troublesome for a girl to lift it up. She wanted to wait for the flight attendant to help, but Lin Yi did it for her. Xinyan didn't hesitate. Thank you. It's no trouble at all. Lin Yi opened the luggage rack with one hand and grabbed Xinyan's suitcase with the other, placing it firmly on top of it. Xinyan's mouth was agape. The suitcase wasn't heavy, but putting it on with one hand showed that Lin Yi had quite the strength. Xinyan sat down, and so did Lin Yi. Thank you for last time. Xinyan had always wanted to say thank you to Lin Yi. If it weren't for Lin Yi, she would have gotten into a lot of trouble. It's nothing, Lin Yi shook his head. Plus, didn't you help me on the train last time? Ha ha, that time? Xinyan smiled at the memory of what happened on the train. You really scared me that time. I thought you were tricked, but who would have thought that those people were the ones who got the worst of it? You're going to Yanjing too? Yeah, it's just a transfer. Lin Yi nodded. Oh, I see. Xinyan was a little disappointed. She'd wanted to treat Lin Yi to a meal to express her gratitude, but Lin Yi had a transfer, so he couldn't leave the airport. The airport was mostly full of fast food, and it wasn't suitable for a formal treat. What about you? What are you going to Yanjing for? Lin Yi asked. I'm going to take care of some family matters. Xinyan's face darkened a little. Oh, Lin Yi saw that Xinyan didn't seem to want to talk about herself, so he didn't press the issue. The two fell into silence. It was obvious that Wang Xinyan was a girl who wasn't good at communicating with people. She was a bit of an introvert, after all. She wouldn't have been listening to her MP3 player when they met on the train. It was also because Xinyan wasn't good with words that Wu Huiru was able to trick her in the business district of the city center. If it had been Yushu or Xinwen, that violent girl, Wu Huiru would have been the one running. Your phone number is... The two spoke at the same time. Xinyan couldn't help but smile at each other. Xinyan blushed a little. Give me your phone. I'll help you. I don't have it with me. I'll give you my number, and you can text me. Linny said, my number is 152x times 1234. Okay. Sinyan nodded and took out a small phone. She keyed in Lin Yi's number and texted it over. You live in Yanjing? The journey was long, and Sinyan didn't like to talk much. Lin Yi had to find a topic himself. It's my grandpa's house, Sinyan said, a little sad. My grandpa passed away. I'm going to the funeral. Ah? Lin Yi blinked, knowing that Sinyan had brought up something sad. My condolences. But why are you alone? My parents passed away before me. I'm still in school, so I had to apply for leave, Sinyan explained. It's nothing. My grandpa and I aren't that close, and we've only met a few times. It's just that I feel bad. My mom broke off with my family when she married my dad. My grandpa and my grandpa are enemies. Lin Yi was getting a bit of a headache from listening to this family's relationship was complicated enough. No wonder Sinyan didn't look too sad at all. Perhaps her mother hadn't gone back much after breaking up with her family, and her grandfather was her grandfather's enemy. Naturally, he wouldn't be too nice to someone with the surname Wang. Chapter 322. Incorrect information. Ah. Sinyan blinked. You're an orphan? You could say that, but I have an old man who loves me dearly. You could call him adoptive father or grandpa. Anyways, his age is a little awkward. Lin Yi scratched his head. I guess I'll just have to call him old man. Ah. Sinyan chuckled at Lin Yi's words. You don't have to comfort me. I'm fine. I'm just feeling a little uncomfortable. My grandpa just passed away, and now my uncles are fighting over the inheritance. Even my grandpa's body was left in the hospital, and my parents were the ones who organized the funeral. Lin Yi was speechless. He didn't know what to say to Sinyan's uncles, letting a daughter they'd broken up with come back to take care of the funeral while they were busy fighting over the inheritance. But it's fine. Our family isn't after anything. My grandpa's family is rich, richer, and more powerful than my grandpa's, but my parents have built a place for themselves after all these years. Sinyan had kept these words bottled up in her heart for a long time, and she probably didn't have anyone she could talk to normally. She decided to talk to someone she could get along with. Lin Yi. It's just that my uncle said that my mom's going back to fight over the inheritance. Lin Yi didn't know what to say as he listened to Sinyan's story. This was family business, after all, and Lin Yi wasn't in a position to butt in. I'm just whining, just don't bother me. Sinyan shook her head with a bitter smile. It's fine, didn't I tell you? Every family has their own problems, and things like this are hard to deal with. As long as you do your best, it'll be fine. Lin Yi said, Yeah, as long as you do your best, it'll be fine. Sinyan nodded. The two talked for a while, and Sinyan seemed to be getting sleepy as well. She leaned back in her chair, falling asleep after a while. Lin Yi turned down the air conditioner for her, before closing his eyes as well. The plane was already descending when Lin Yi woke up. Sinyan was listening to her MP3 player, a few bags of snacks, and a glass of juice on the table. Sinyan took her headphones off when she saw that Lin Yi was awake. She handed Lin Yi a bag of snacks from the table. Here, they were distributed on the plane when you were asleep. I got one for you. You can eat it. I don't like these things very much. Lin Yi took a look at it and found it was mostly dehydrated vegetable slices. He didn't like it. Yeah, thanks. Sinyan seemed to like these snacks a lot, and she'd already finished her portion. It didn't take long for the plane to land at Yanjing Airport, and Sinyan went to the domestic arrival point while Lin went to the International Transfer Lounge. The encounter with Wang Sinyan was just a small interlude, and Lin Yi was on a plane to Bluetown. There was no one he knew on the plane this time, and so Lin Yi closed his eyes and fell asleep. When he opened his eyes, he was already in a foreign land. This was a small town full of exotic atmosphere, but it was not Blue Town. Blue Town was a few kilometers away from here by car. Lin E flagged down a taxi after exiting the airport, telling the driver that he was going to Blue Town in English. English was the common language of the world, and it was effective in this exotic European town as well. There were many customers on the way from the airport to Blue Town, and the driver was used to it. Ever since the Blue Water took control of Blue Town, it had become a place of luxury and debauchery with casinos, red light districts, and drug dealing all over the place. There were a lot of customers visiting Blue Town every day, and the driver thought that Lin E was a tourist. You can have some fun there, young man, but don't get too addicted to it, or else, sigh. Haha, thanks, I'm just going to take a look. Lin E thought that the driver was a good guy. After all, the driver didn't try to convince him otherwise, and started talking about the local culture in Blue Town instead. Lin E had a clear Asian face, and he was obviously a tourist. Don't offend the people in blue baseball caps in Blue Town. They're members of the Blue Water gang, and they hang out in casinos and brothels. The Blue Water is the only gang in Blue Town, and they're very powerful. You might not be able to come back if you piss them off. I've heard of that before. Lin E nodded. Right, sir. I'd like to ask, where's the Blue Water HQ? HQ? Why are you asking? The driver asked, suddenly alarmed. I'm staying somewhere far away from them. It sounds scary, and I'm traveling alone. I want to avoid trouble. Lin E explained with a smile. Oh, I see. The driver let out a breath of relief. The Blue Water HQ is in an old castle on the west side of the town, but the core of the Blue Water isn't there. The castle is too eye-catching, and there's only the Blue Water members there. I see. Linny wondered, could the information be wrong? According to the information Guangbua had given him, that blue castle was the Blue Water's headquarters, but Guangbua hadn't looked into it before, something that even a taxi driver knew? Haha. Yeah, one of my cousins is a member of the Blue Water, so he knows a bit more. Their HQ is in an auto repair shop in the North District, and only a few people know about it. But you're a tourist from another city, so it's fine to tell you. Try not to go to the North District. All right, I won't go then. Lin E was moved, just as he expected. The HQ of the Blue Water wasn't too big of a secret, but it was too far from Songsan, and Guangbua could only find some superficial information. Without actual investigation, there would be no specific search results on the internet. Lin E had the driver drop him off in the Blue City, and then took another taxi to the North District, finding a hotel to check into. There were plenty of tourists from the east like Lin E, so no one in the hotel paid any attention to Lin E. Lin E took a quick look at the room before leaving the hotel with his sunglasses on, wandering the streets of the North District. Chapter 3:23. Chapter 3:23. First time in the city, Lin E walked the streets of the Northern District leisurely. Lin E didn't have a destination in mind, so all he needed to do was remember the way back. At an ATM, Lin E took out a few thousand euros and put it in his pocket before continuing to stroll around the Northern District. A car repair factory. Lin E frowned. He'd never known it before, but now that he'd come out, he realized just how big the Northern District was. There were all sorts of people with nightclubs, discotheques, and karaoke all over the place. It seemed like the closer he got to the Blue Water's HQ, the more businesses there were. Lin E didn't believe that these were just legal. Lin E saw a couple of women flirting with him as he walked past. Of course, Lin E didn't know if the sex trade was illegal here, and Lin E didn't have the time to look into it either. After a moment of silence, he made a bold decision. He stopped a man with a scar on his face and a blue baseball cap. This guy didn't look like a good person at first glance, especially the obvious gang emblem on top of his head, which could also prove this point. He wasn't one of the higher-ups of the Blue Water, though. What kind of person would walk around alone without a bodyguard? Do you know who I am, kid? Do you want to die? The scarred man wasn't expecting Lin E to stop him. He started yelling in the local language. Hey, don't rush, bro. Lin E pretended to be cautious as he looked around. I'm from out of town, and I heard that the Blue Water Gang has some cheap cars for sale. I'd like to buy one to play with. Do you have any connections, bro? Don't worry, there'll be benefits. Oh, you want to buy a car? The scarred man looked Lin E up and down. Lin Yi's skin was obviously foreign, and he didn't look like a spy from the cops, either. He didn't say anything else. The Blue Water did have a large number of stolen cars in their hands, and that was one of their main sources of income. They'd buy illegal and stolen cars from other cities, change their engine numbers and license plates, and then sell them to the less well-managed areas. As a low-level member of the Blue Water Gang, selling stolen cars, drugs, and even bringing customers to the casino would earn them a hefty commission. That was pretty much how they lived. So the scarred man was interested when he heard that Linny wanted to buy a car. What car are you buying? How much is it? Scarface didn't ask Lin E what he was buying the car for, since there was no need to ask. It was a rule in the industry, and if people didn't ask about the origin of the car, then there was no need to care about what the car was for. In any case, the money was exchanged, and the goods were exchanged. They did not owe each other anything, and after that, they did not know each other. Anything is fine, as long as it's a little cheaper. Lin E naturally wouldn't put on airs and buy a high-priced stolen car. Anyway, this kind of thing could be thrown away after it was used. Even if Lin E used Falbert's credit card, Lin E didn't want to cause trouble. Who knew if this guy in front of him was the kind of person who was greedy for money? What if he saw his extravagant spending and had evil thoughts? Lin E wasn't afraid of him, but Lin Yi's main goal was to bring Xie Jinbiao back to the country. He didn't plan on getting into any conflict with the Blue Water Gang. Whether they were good or bad had nothing to do with Lin E. Scarface wasn't disappointed by Lin Yi's words. After all, most of the luxury cars were smuggled to other countries, and the ones left for sale weren't anything good. It was good enough for someone like him to get a deal like this in a month, so he didn't mind. They're cheap, ranging from a few €100 to a few thousand. Dollars are fine, too. Take me there. Lin E said, follow me. Scarface nodded and led Lin E through the northern district. Lin E followed behind him at a leisurely pace, arriving at the entrance of a car repair shop after 10 or so minutes of walking. A smile formed on Lin Yi's lips. It seemed that he'd made the right bet. The Blue Water stolen cars were indeed stored in the factory. This repair shop was probably the Blue Water's headquarters. York, who's this guy? A Blue Water member with a blue hat standing guard at the door recognized Scarface, but not Lin E. Here to buy a car. York greeted him with a smile and swaggered into the shop with Lin E. Evidently, they didn't think that Lin E would be able to cause much of a ruckus in Blue Water territory by himself. They didn't even bother with a body search before letting him in. Lin E shook his head inwardly. The Blue Water's management was a little too lax. In actuality, the Blue Water was the overlord of Blue City. The Blue Water members could wipe out anyone who tried to cause trouble in any part of the city, let alone the headquarters. York brought Lin E to a big yard at the back of the repair factory. There were close to 100 cars parked there. Some models Lin E had seen before, and some he hadn't seen before. They all looked like they'd been there for a long time. They're all here. Pick one you like and give it a try. It's fine. York's attitude was quite nice. He'd get a high commission if this deal went through, and he'd have a month's worth of pocket money. This one, Lin E pointed at a nondescript old Santana. This one, I'll give you a discount. How about €500? York gave a price after a glance at the car Lin E was talking about. That's a little expensive, but I'm buying it with sincerity. Lin E shook his head. It's not expensive. It's a reasonable price. This is a car from 10 years ago, and it's still very good. York said, 400. Lin E took a look at the model and condition of the car. It was probably from the 90s. And this car was probably as old as he was. 10 years. Maybe 18 years, a little higher. For 150? York asked. In actuality, Lin E wasn't cutting the price too harshly. It was more or less a normal price, and he did look sincere. For 100 it is. This car is more than 10 years old, and I'm just buying it for a ride. Who knows, I might throw it away in a few days. Lin E said, All right, for 100 it is then. York nodded readily, cash in one hand, and the goods in the other. Chapter 324. A cool girl, nope, remember my number. Call me if anyone tries to stop you. York paused before taking off his hat and handing it to Lin E. Here, you wear my hat, and the cops in this city won't give us any trouble. All right, thank you. Lin E put the hat on. I'll just say I'm Boss York's lackey if anyone gives me any trouble, all right? Of course. York was so happy that he couldn't stop smiling when Linny called him boss. Just say it. York, have a bit of a reputation in this little blue city. Lin E nodded, counting out 400 euros and handing it to York. Lin E only had a few thousand euros in his pocket, so York wasn't too greedy. He let Linny get in his car after taking the money. The keys were in the car, so there was no need to worry about it being stolen in the garage. Lin E drove out of the garage. Lin Yi's things were a lot easier now that he had the hat, and York thought he'd taken advantage of him. The car hadn't gone far when they saw a pretty girl trying to flag down a car. She waved when she saw Lin Yi's car coming over. Naturally, Lin E wasn't really interested in hitchhiking. There were at least 80 pretty girls who'd hit on him in the north, and no one knew what they did for a living. Lin E, however, was paying attention to the girl because she was an Asian. It was a strange feeling to see an Asian girl in a foreign country. The girl had a pair of sunglasses on her cool face and a black outfit that was quite eye-catching. Lin E, however, felt a sense of familiarity, even though the sunglasses covered most of her face. Lin E wouldn't have stopped the car if it weren't for the fact that she looked familiar. What's up? Lin E was wearing a blue baseball cap and a pair of oversized sunglasses. His outfit was probably similar to this cool chick's, and it was hard to tell his true appearance from the outside. Handsome, can I hitch a ride? The cool chick squeezed out a smile on her cool face. Hitchhike? I don't even know where I'm going. How am I supposed to drive you? As Lin E spoke, he sized up the young girl. She looked very familiar, giving Lin E a feeling of déjà vu, but he couldn't remember where. He'd seen too many people these years, and it was normal for him to feel a sense of familiarity from time to time. That's great. Since you don't know where to go, just send me to Kenny Hotel. The cool girl opened the door of the front passenger seat and got in the car. Lin E smiled. I don't know where the Kenny Hotel is. HM? The girl paused. Aren't you from the Blue Water Gang? How come you don't know where it is? I just joined. Is there a problem? Lin E shrugged. Oh, it's nothing. You drive. I'll show you the way. The girl's voice was a little disappointed, but still cold. Lin E started the car, and it started moving slowly. Lin E looked at the girl out of the corner of his eye. A tourist from out of town, but Lin E didn't think it was possible. How could a tourist from out of town be so bold as to stop a hitchhike on the street? How dare he hitchhike, especially after knowing he was a member of the Blue Water Gang? Wasn't she afraid of death? With that in mind, Lin E started to get curious about the girl's identity. Had he seen her before? If he could take off her sunglasses, he might be able to remember. Self-guided tour. The girl's answer surprised Lin E. Self-guided tour? Self-guided tour? You know about the Blue Water Gang? Lin E retorted. The girl was obviously lying. Of course I'm interested. I admire the strong. The cool chick tried her best to make her smile more charming and moving, but the forced smile on her cool face was almost the same as a sneer. Lin, he was speechless. There was no way to lie like that. Was there? But he still found it funny. Admire the strong? So you're here waiting for a hitchhike in front of the Blue Water Gang? Yeah, didn't I meet you? The cool chick smiled. Can you tell me about your gang? I want to know. Sorry, I just joined. Sorry to disappoint you. Lin, he was getting more and more curious about the girl. She didn't even know how to lie. So, what did she do? Then you should know who the leader of your gang is, right? Is it Charlton? I heard it's him. The girl asked. Probably. Lin E had done some research on the Blue Water Gang, and that seemed to be the leader's name. Then do you know where he is? The girl ignored Lin Yi's probably. Is he in this repair shop? Or Blue Castle? In the repair factory, Lin E answered offhandedly. This was the information he'd gotten from the taxi driver. I see. Then do you guys see him? Which building does he usually work in? The cool girl continued to ask, curiously. That I don't know. Lin E wasn't really a member of the Blue Water Gang, so how would he know that much? Why don't you know anything? The girl was a little angry. Then can you take me to him? Why do you want to see him? Lin E felt that this girl was a little strange, but the question made Lin E frown. There was a black SUV following him, from afar. He'd been too focused on talking to the girl and didn't even know where the hotel was. He'd been driving aimlessly, and the car was still following them from afar. He wouldn't believe it if someone told him that he wasn't following them. The Blue Water Gang? Lin E frowned as he thought back to his previous actions. There wasn't anything suspicious about it, and he hadn't even revealed his intentions. He didn't even have a lot of cash on him, so why would someone from the Blue Water be following him? What made Lin E curious was that the SUV had followed him from behind, and not from the Blue Water's repair shop. Lin E had looked behind him when he left the shop to make sure no one was following him. Could it be someone who was following the girl? With that thought, Lin E felt that it was possible. It was probably after the cool girl was picked up that the MPV behind them caught up. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.